Gail, you good? Gail?
Yes.
Are you good? Are you ready? Let me know when you're ready.
I will be short.
Okay.
All right, I'm ready.
All right.
Raise that flag.
All right. I would like to call the King George County School Board regular meeting, June 22nd, 2020, to order. May we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to its republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. First item on the agenda is the moment of, public employee comment. We have two comments. Yvonne Richard, where are they? Here we go.
Good evening. My name is Yvonne Richard, and I am a resident of King George County. I'm a STEM teacher for King George County Schools, a co-president of the King George chapter of the Virginia Professional Educators, and a parent of two students who attend King George County Schools, one at King George Middle School and one at King George High School. In our small community, I wear many hats, but tonight I'm speaking as a parent and as an individual teacher. I do not claim to represent the other teachers tonight, although I am sure many of them share these opinions. Since March the 13th, our world has changed, some for the better, some for the worse. While I have enjoyed my time at home with my family, I have missed my students every day. They're a huge part of my life as a teacher. When schools initially closed for 2 weeks, I was excited for the opportunity to catch up on all those tasks that sometimes go by the wayside during the school year. However, when the closing became permanent for the remainder of the school year, I saw bigger challenges were ahead. How would I continue as a STEM teacher in a virtual setting? How would I get my own two children to complete their classwork? What would next year look like? These are just some of the questions that I had, and there are many more that frequently keep me up at night. On my own, I decided to move forward by setting up a studio in my basement, and with the help of my 7th grader, produced our school morning show live on YouTube daily. I shared our daily link to the live show on our school Facebook group and shared with staff and asked them to share electronically with the families. While I knew not every family was able to access the show, I felt like I was able to make a contribution to the education of our students. I heard from several parents how much my efforts were appreciated by them and their children to help bring some normalcy to their days. On June the 9th, I listened as our governor unrolled his plan for the return to school this fall. I visited the VDOE website, and I began to read the 136-page plan. As I began to read the plan and see what could be in store for our future in education, I had many sleepless nights. I watched on social media as many surrounding counties began to survey their families about the fall. I heard from friends in other districts that have been included in staff surveys about a reopening plan. On social media, I watched as several other districts began to unroll their plans to families. And I'm attending tonight's meeting because the school reopening plan is on the agenda. As I stand before you tonight, I urge you to please include teachers and staff and families in the development of the reopening plan for King George County Schools. I would ask you to consider including middle school and high school students about what they think as plans are developed. As a parent of two children who had some classes to complete online during the closing, I'm here to say that they had wildly different experiences. I am not saying that one had a better or worse experience, but they were very different. I look forward to returning to school and seeing my students and continuing to provide the best education we can provide in King George County schools. But I do hope that teachers and parents and students will be included in the discussion for the reopening plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. Elizabeth Richard?
Hello, I am Elizabeth Richard and I live in King George County. I'm a student at King George High School and I would like to see that students are involved in the process to returning to school. Some things that should really be considered by students are the social aspects of school, how students learn best, what home life is like, and sports. At King George High School, students interact with a very wide, diverse student population. If students are split into groups, there is an increased chance that a student may not have any friends in that group. Students also have different learning strategies. I myself am a visual and a hands-on learner, and online learning is extremely difficult. Additionally, information sticks better when I'm in the classroom with my teachers and other students present, and we can all interact and discuss and do labs and projects. Home life should also be considered because not everyone has Wi-Fi or devices to complete online schooling. And some families have more people in their families and have a louder home setting, and it can be extremely difficult for them to focus on the information that they need to be taught. Sports, clubs, and other extracurricular activities are a huge aspect of student life at the high school. As many students join clubs and sports, they begin to make friends and they learn new interests. Sports also provide scholarships to students, specifically ones that may not go to college without them. Please consider involving students in your discussion to returning to school. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is changes to the agenda.
Make a motion to change the action item for the budget to discussion.
Second.
Okay. We have a second. I'd like to open it up for discussion.
So we just got the information for the changes, and so I believe we should have an emergency meeting before July 1st when we'll need a budget, so we can mull over the changes if there's anybody who agrees.
Any other further discussion?
I agree with Mr. Collins. It may be that we could do it by Zoom, that we could do it electronically. However we do it, I think we need time to compare and process and seek out our constituents' opinion.
Okay. Do we have any objections?
This information has been had for a week almost. It's not changed very much from our last year's budget. We knew that we're level funded and no new positions will be added and there will be no raises for employees. So I'm not sure what kind of questions can be asked that are not pretty straightforward to be answered in the information that we have. The county budget was approved last fiscal year. Yes. And I'm not in favor of the meeting between now and Tuesday to this budget. So.
Okay. So the motion is to move the budget discussion or the budget from the information items. I'm sorry, I'm all messed up today. From the action item onto the discussion item. We'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay. All right. The chair votes aye. The motion has been approved, and the budget will be discussed under the discussion items. I also have any other changes to the agenda? I have a change to the agenda. The board items for future agendas, I was working with Cheryl today, and due to an outage, she was not able, we were communicating back and forth on how to present it. She was not able to complete that. So she's going to continue working on that tomorrow. We will get that emailed out to you guys, and we'll put that on to discuss for the next meeting. The other thing I'd like to put on the discussion item,
Can we still have that, Madam Chair?
Yes.
For discussion, board items for future agenda?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand you.
You wanted to take it off the
So
discussion
yes,
items?
I want to take
Can we keep it on?
F, I would like to take F off of board items for future agendas to be removed.
Can we keep it on so we can have a starter discussion? We don't have to have it in print at this time.
Okay, Di? I don't have a problem with that, if that's what you'd like to do. We can continue that discussion. You guys are okay with that?
Yep, I would agree.
Right. Okay, so we'll leave it on. And then the other thing is I just would like to discuss the possibility of having a alternate July meeting go ahead, so we can discuss that with, I know a lot of people having vacations. If we do need that extra July meeting, I would just like to have that tentatively set so that we're not scrambling at the last minute if it's needed.
Absolutely.
Okay? All right, so I've never done this. Do we need to vote on that? Go ahead, Ms. Gonzalez.
Are we setting a date today or after this?
We'll set a tentative date during the discussion,
Okay.
and then if it's needed, then we'll have a date already set up. Okay.
So can I make a motion to have a meeting before, a properly advertised meeting before July 1st so we can approve the budget?
So I think that's something that we would discuss when we discuss the budget.
Okay.
Okay. So I've never really added something to the budget. Do we have to vote on that? Do we have to vote on adding that item discussing the alternate July meeting date to the budget or to the agenda?
the agenda.
You guys are okay? Okay.
You're just going to
Okay.
give proper notice.
Yes, sir. Okay, any other changes to the agenda? All right, so we'll move on to action items. We have the Canon and Ricoh copier lease. Mr. Hopper, is he here tonight?
Madam Chair.
Oh, phew, yes. Hi, Dr. Benson.
Hello, I'm here, and
Okay.
I'd introduce this agenda item for you. Before I do, can I just take one moment to explain why I'm typing in electronically for our public? Is that okay?
Yes, please do.
Okay, I appreciate that opportunity. I'll be very brief, but this afternoon, and I apologize I'm not there in person, but this afternoon, I had a family member contact me with whom I had visited late last week, but he contacted me and alerted me that he and another member of his family had tested positive for the COVID virus. So I obviously needed to alert you all that best I not, until I'm tested and I learn my status, it's not a good idea for me to come and be with you or to have myself come into the school, obviously, for the meeting. So I do apologize, I can't be there in person. This was certainly my intent. I was actually looking forward to it since we've not been together physically. But at any rate, that's, I just want to put that out there and make sure folks understood why I needed to join you remotely this evening. With that said, this is the second time this item has been before you as a board. As you know, we enter into lease agreements for copying service for copiers. Half of our fleet is on one lease that is a 2-year lease. The other half is on a separate 2-year lease. It is time for us to then renew a lease for half of our copiers. We presented this last meeting. There were some questions about procurement and the process. My hope is that question has been answered. I think Ms. Bushrod had a document that she may have provided you. But with that said, I know this is on for action. It is helpful if we're able to come to a decision this night so that we can get the company moving to have those machines installed prior to the opening of the school year. But thank you for that, and I'm happy to entertain any other questions or requests you need for additional feedback if it's necessary. Thank you.
All right, so do I have a motion to approve the copier lease?
I make a motion to approve the copier lease.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Do you have a discussion? I'm sorry.
It doesn't have the motion, so why don't you read it?
Well, I think here it's moving.
Yeah, I just asked for discussion. Is there any discussion?
Yes. Can you add into your motion the amount?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I have to find it here. I make a motion to approve the Canon 4-year lease at an annual cost not to exceed $77,988, and the Ricoh color copier not to exceed $11,952. The total cost of the two contracts not to exceed $89,940,000.
Okay, so now do we have a second? Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Okay, so the budget has been moved to the discussion items, so we're on to the discussion items. We have the 2021 Student and Family Handbook and Student Code of Conduct.
Thank you, Madam Chair. These are, each year we updated this meeting, or we asked the board to consider approving any amendments we've made to our student family handbook or the code of conduct in specific. I know Ms. Fisher has worked to update the document. I believe, forgive me, I believe she's there, or at least available to answer any questions that you may have, but we do appreciate your consideration in approving this document so that we can move forward. I'll leave it at that and be happy to answer any questions I can field, or refer to Ms. Fisher for any questions you may have.
Did anybody have any questions from Ms. Fisher?
I have a question. In the, I'm trying to look at what section it is here. In the restorative practices section, it says that in the 2019-2020 school year, King George Elementary School was going to serve as a pilot school for implementing the program, and then in consultation with OOY, I forget what that stands for here. Anyway, that foundational components of restorative practices are going to be implemented at other King George County schools based on the outcome of the King George Elementary pilot program. I was wondering, since that was this past year, I know the year got cut short, has there been, have the findings and the assessment from that pilot program been compiled yet?
We do have some information from Office on Youth, certainly because we had to close in March. We don't have everything.
All of it?
I can't hear you if you don't speak at the mic.
We do have some of those. Our Office on Youth has some of that, those data points, but we weren't able to collect all of the information we hoped to through the end of the school year. I can certainly get that from them and have them compile some information and provide it to the board at a later date.
Okay, that would be great.
Any other comments? I just have a quick little one. I appreciate the little verbiage that you put in the beginning about the COVID update, that it won't, Ms. Fisher, that just to kind of let everybody know that it's a work in progress, and that anything I'm guessing that comes out of what the governor or whatever we request, it's up for maybe adaptation. I don't know why I can't talk here. I'm intimidated by this vast sea of chairs. I don't know why, but it's kind of scary up here. But no, I appreciate that. I like the way you worded it. That's the only comment I have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher.
Yes, thank you. Yep.
And we do understand how difficult it is given this iteration.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to the King George Middle School Chromebook purchase.
Forgive me, Madam Chair, I think you moved on. We're having some weather here where I am, so I'm in and out of the audio, but we've moved to item B?
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. So each year, the school division does have access to grant funds through the state through VPSA. This is a planned Chromebook purchase. utilizing those funds, and certainly, well, I'll be talking later, but certainly the need for Chromebooks will be evident this year. So we appreciate your consideration in allowing us to execute the expenditure and using the BPSA technology funds for the Chromebook purchase as indicated.
Does anybody have any questions?
Well, I do. I really would like an update of our total Chromebook count and location. You know, and I'm sure we'll hear more later, but if we are to try to disperse Chromebooks, how would we do that? And do we have enough to do that with this additional purchase? I also understand from looking at the new money supposedly coming in that there are more grants for additional technology, and do we know at this point what that will do for us? I know it's all in transition at this point, and a lot of it is just revealed, but I'd really like an update on our status.
Certainly, we can provide an update as you described, and you're correct. The one of the possible uses of the CARES funding, I think you were referring to, Ms. Hock, could be to enhance our technology or our ability to serve our students remotely. But we can certainly have or compile, a listing of the available Chromebooks. You're also correct that embedded in not just what I'm going to present tonight, but then future updates as we get closer to the 2021 school year, we'll make evident how we can best utilize the Chromebooks and with whom.
Okay.
So you'll probably have not just a standalone inventory type information set that we can provide, but through future updates, you'll also get a sense of how those machines will be applied and utilized as we move into the fall.
Thank you. That's exactly what I need.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any discussion? Questions?
Discussion item.
It's a discussion item. I mean, I agree with you. Yeah, I do agree with you that I would like to have all that information, but I think that no matter what, this is right. I think that, we are aware that we're going to need more Chromebooks, and I think that if we could go ahead and approve this, that it might just get a jump start. Oh, we don't have a, yeah, we do have a dollar amount
in the packet.
Wasn't there a dollar amount on there? Yeah, there's a dollar amount.
For a cost not to exceed $221,733. So I move that we accept the Chromebook purchase for a cost not to exceed $221,733. Second.
Any discussion?
Again, we're moving an item off of discussion into action.
Yes.
Which is not the proper Robert's rules, the way to conduct meetings. So I think we're going to have another meeting by the end of this month.
You have a motion and a second.
Right, I'm in discussion at this time. Thank you.
Yep.
So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Is there any other further discussion? Can we go ahead and vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Chair votes aye. Motion moves that the King George Middle School Chromebook purchased will be approved. Okay. Next on the discussion item is the King George Middle School Computer Refresh 2021 local funds.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is also an annual time of year where we have the opportunity in the summer to refresh local devices that are due to be refreshed, and then that cycle's a 5 or 6 year cycle where Mr. Hopper and his staff look to try to budget and keep fresh our technology. So it is King George Middle School's turn. These would be operating budget funds, not the BPSA funds that you just approved. And so these would be a fiscal year 21 purchase. but it's there on discussion. Again, in hopes that then on your next meeting, between now and then, you could consider for approval so that we could order those at your next meeting, after your next meeting.
Is there any discussion or questions?
Question, at this point, is the middle school electronically set up to do this? Will there be a need for any preface work, or are we good to go with just the purchase?
If I understand you correctly, are you talking in light of the renovation that's
Yes.
ongoing?
Yes.
Yes, indications are to me that the refresh would then be for machines that would be in utilized spaces that would be complete in time for the fall. There will still be renovation going on in the fall, obviously, if that addresses your question.
Yes, I really was just asking if there wouldn't be any budgetary need, any additional budget funding needed for this additional refresh.
Not additional other than what's indicated there.
Okay.
For the refresh.
Okay, that's good.
But again, we would have access if we found that needs emerged that required additional technology. We could certainly access the CARES funding that is due to be received by our division.
Do we know how much funding we will get at this point?
It's approximately $330,000 through the CARES Act, correct? You're asking?
Total, yes. But that's the
Yes.
total, is that correct? Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to the next discussion item, policy JN, student fees, fines, and charges.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is another annual item that comes before the board to make sure that we have the board approve any changes in student fees. It is on your agenda, however, we are still awaiting, I believe, information that Ms. Davis needs from her state representative in terms of any changes to school lunch prices for next year. But nonetheless, we wanted to put it on your radar, put it on the agenda so that you get an opportunity to at least read through that. Our hope is by the next meeting, you will have then the actual amounts for those student lunch fees that I believe are marked TBD in your packet. But we appreciate your consideration in the annual update to policy JN.
Okay, great. Any questions?
I have a question, being new to this. Just so the increase in lunch prices, is that just a result of inflation and general cost increases, or is there something else with regards to like the menu or something else that drives the increase in cost?
I don't want to guess, Ms. Gonzalez, it's a good question, and I do believe that it is based on a consumer price index, but I believe there are also other variables that may be in place. So let me do this. Let me speak with Ms. Davis and have her get an answer to that prior to the next meeting so we can bring that answer and the updated fees to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, next on the agenda is the VSBA Board Development Training. This is something that we have talked about in the past. We had also talked about hiring somebody outside of the VSBA to do something similar to this over the last 2 years. It never really came to fruition. We just got some information via email, and with the way things are going with the pandemic and everything and having some new board members on board, I just thought this might be a good opportunity for us to take advantage of this, and also part of our budget we would use when we go to the conference, which we're not going to be virtual this year. So that was my thought process behind requesting that. I know it's really upsetting that we're not going to be able to have that, but I'm not sure how they're going to do it virtually. That'll be interesting.
So in terms of looking at this training, are you thinking toward a retreat type of thing, either
So,
or?
yeah, so they offer it online. It's through, I believe it is through Zoom. So I don't know if, we could possibly get in a sitting as this so that we still keep social distancing. For those that want to be able to get together, and then those that may not be more comfortable, they can participate through Zoom. I'm sure we could probably use the conference room up in the school board office where we could keep the social distancing, which we did something like that the first year I was here. It was a little different, but yeah. Yeah, that was a webinar, that's correct. So it'd be very similar to that.
And I think there is sufficient room in that conference room at the school board office.
Yeah, I'm sure we could probably bring something up on the screen, and then we could all have our own little corner
Right.
and go from there.
Depends on the timing too, we don't know what.
Yeah. So I guess it would be at least 6 of us. I'm assuming Dr. Benson would be involved in that, right? So that would definitely be under the 10 if we're still at that point.
So I think this is an excellent idea. But for our new board member and for the rest of us, get caught up, because VSBA has been doing a number of changes and updates. So I think it'd be a great idea.
And I think it'll help us to collaborate with, the recent situation, having a better understanding of how we can handle that and help the staff.
I think it's a good idea, but I also think that in addition to, we could maybe have a team building here in King George, maybe in July, at someone's, someplace where we can be social distance.
A picnic of some sort? I think is what he's talking about, a picnic. We had talked about that before, and I think we got rained out. I think we were going to have it at Miss Hawk's house, and we had gotten some bad weather or something. So,
We'll have a deck. We can certainly social distance on the deck, and then there's the river.
yeah.
So I think both are good ideas.
Social pilot.
Ms. Pansier, did you have a timeline in mind for the training session?
No, Dr. Benson, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that if everyone's willing to move forward, we would just possibly get Mrs. Bushrod to reach out to them to see if they could set up or facilitate a time. Would that be correct, Ms. Bushrod? Yes, that's something that you would do? Yeah. So she would get in touch with them, and they would give us some dates, and then we would figure out when we could meet.
And is that I remember seeing this in the past, but is that a single session for a couple hours or a couple days, or how does that?
It's usually a day. I think it's 6 hours.
Okay.
Or half day. I think it's 4 to 6 hours. I don't remember. They've changed it since it's become virtual, so I think they've kind of shortened it a little bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have to eat. Come on, gotta eat. Okay, so is everybody in favor that we can ask Ms. Bushrod if she could set that up for us? Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Awesome. Okay. The next item is the board items for future agendas. Well, we wanted to leave it on just for discussion. So maybe we can just leave it open for any items that people have that I know that they might want to make sure that it's on the agendas in the coming rest of the 6 months that are left of the year. I know some of the things that were on there. We have the comprehensive plan that we need to look at. We've got the pre-budget public hearing that I was thinking or recommending that we could merge that with the the 2 teacher reps, King George Education Association, and then the Virginia Education, right. We could have just one meeting, possibly in October maybe, where we just have a pre-budget hearing and discussion from our constituents and staff. Some of the other things is that we have our superintendent evaluation and our board evaluation. I know in the past we've talked about looking at maybe revamping, especially the superintendent evaluation. It tends to be a little bit of a daunting process, and we had discussed about maybe simplifying it some. I don't know if that's something that 1 or 2 of the board members would like to take on and do a little bit more research towards that. I don't know if there's any other items. I can't think off the top of my head.
CTE,
Oh, yeah, CTE. So we had done a subcommittee, and we were hoping that we would get a report here in February, March area, our timeframe. And of course, with everything that's happened, that hasn't. So hopefully we can get back on track and possibly get a CTE report from what they've found in all of their research that they've done. I know several of us would like to talk a little bit more in depth about the CTE programs.
Keeping in mind that subcommittee hasn't met since March, so not a lot to report. Anytime soon, there's not going to be any information.
No, so we're looking at anything from July to December.
so before the end of the year.
Yes, and then I think we're going to include in January, just because there are, in the beginning of the year, there's a lot of things that we have to start off with. So Ms. Bushrod, I gave her the list. She had a couple items that she felt needed to be added to that. She can finish that list up, possibly get it out in an email to everybody, and then we can discuss it at our next meeting and then move forward.
So at this point, the process for putting an item on the agenda is to contact you?
Yes,
correct?
that's correct.
And you would make a decision about if it goes on the agenda or not?
Yes, or at what point in time would it be discussed at the agenda, depending on the topics that we're discussing? Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's in different ways through the years. There's been.
Well, if you talk about something during your board comment that you want put on your agenda, that's one way as well.
Yes. Yes.
And some things are time sensitive. That's what this is probably talking about, things that need to happen at a certain time.
Yes, that's correct. So once we look at it, we don't have to finish the discussion. If there's something else that we want to add or, we can think of or, move things around, whether it's a CTE, if we do it in September and we think it needs to be moved to November or something like that, that's when we'll have that discussion.
And everything's up in the air.
Yeah, everything seems to be up in the air at the moment.
And was it, as far as putting things on so items for future agendas, I guess that's different from actually, I guess, what is the process? So we're going to have a discussion about things that go on a list to be included in future agendas. What is our process for deciding? Are we going to vote on what goes on the list of items for future agendas? And when they get, which agendas they get added to, or how is that going to work?
Well, I think it's just more of an informative process. I don't know that we actually need to vote on it. I think it's just so everybody understands what we can expect to discuss, and if there's a topic that we want to bring up that is relative to that topic for that night, then that would be a good time to add it to the agenda. Or I know there were a couple of times where I didn't really have a specific topic. I'm sure Mrs. Bushrod will find something on there. And we say, this night is light. Hey, this is a time where I'd like to discuss this. That just gives us an advance to look ahead, just to know when would be a good time to talk about things. If we have a passion that we want to talk about the CTE or, some other program that we do or do not offer, and we see that it's coming up on the agenda, then we'll know that that's the best time to have that discussion. So, and it kind of also plays into play a little bit with the to-do list, kind of merging the two together. So, in the past, the to-do list has been kind of more of, a to-do list for the staff, but instead of us having a to-do list for the board, we can look ahead and we can say, okay, we have the comprehensive plan, we need to, which I did bring a copy for everybody, by the way, the current comprehensive plan. So then, we can look over that and we'll know that, we need to prepare for it. And if there are any other items, like Ms. Gonzalez, I was thinking, you wanted to have the public pre-budget hearing. And I just thought it was a good time to kind of have one meeting where we discussed the budget and had all of the parties involved that had interest in putting in their opinions or their concerns with the budget all in one agenda, so that we're not kind of like all over the place talking about the same thing several times throughout the year. And then, if there's anything else, if we, want to look into some things, I know that some of our board members have talked about other things that they would like to see implemented or have questions with, then we can also keep those on the agenda so that we all have a better understanding of when that time frame is going to come. That was the point behind it.
So I know you mentioned that you were hoping to have the board items put together for today, and that didn't quite happen. But I know we've talked about the to-do list, I guess, for 6 months now. It's June. I mean, we're still not quite there, so are we confident that by the next meeting we will be discussing that, or what are our thoughts?
So this was kind of talking about the to-do list. I thought this would almost be like the to-do list would become part of the future agenda item list. I'm not sure. I'd asked at the last board meeting if anybody had any items that they wanted to put on the to-do list to let me know, and then I could start formulating that. I hadn't gotten any specifics from anybody, so I don't know if anybody has anything specifically that they'd like to put on a to-do list or have a little bit, I mean, we can have a little bit more discussion about the to-do list, but I think that I haven't really discredited it. I don't think that it's something that we shouldn't discuss, but I think until, maybe we get through this pandemic a little bit and get a little bit more structured in order into our governance, that we can definitely talk about it a little bit then.
Okay, so as far as providing input for things that should be considered, I know you mentioned the pre-budget survey or pre-budget hearing that I mentioned, so I guess that's gaining traction. I know I had mentioned surveys and brought it up a number of times. Do I need to bring it up again for it to be put on a to-do list or an agenda item?
I think, I know that I talked to Dr. Benson, but as far as the surveys, and I think that we had that discussion that you were going to talk to him to see if he could get a list of the surveys that we currently have throughout the year.
I asked, that was
I know that the staff has been pretty tasked with trying to figure out our new school planning system. So, Dr. Benson, I can just ask if you could, maybe get us a list of those surveys. And I think that with what's coming up, we're going to be having some more surveys. I know that also the CTE program had given out some surveys specifically for them. So, if there's any time that, I don't know if somebody can recommend when we can go back. Mrs. Bushrod, if you have any ideas of when we can go back to past minutes to see what some of the surveys are that are given out. I know that we've discussed that before. But I think that that's definitely something that we can do. If that actually goes on the to-do list, I mean, we can have a to-do list, but the whole purpose of having the to-do list is so that we don't try to task the staff with something specific. If you talk to Dr. Benson and you talk to me and you still haven't received the surveys, then, maybe talk to Dr. Benson again, or maybe, they've just been overwhelmed with what's going on, and maybe he can lead you into talking to, I don't know if that would be Mrs. Fisher or Mrs. Hill or a conglomerate of a couple of staff members to help that out.
Chair?
Yes,
Can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead. You're good.
Okay, I'm sorry, again, I'm having some weather here, so it's a little bit in and out too, but it just occurred to me that is there a way, and I don't know if you've spoken to BSBA, but this item and the topic of board agenda items, generating board agenda items, that type of thing, the to-do list, being a first cousin of that, is there a way they could bring into the training they provide information or example systems from other divisions or best practices they know about how that process could take place, perhaps, as part of the training?
I'm sure they could, yeah.
Is it just a canned training that they provide?
No, actually, when I did talk to them, they said that we could give them a list of specifics that we would like to cover. They have a list here also that they go through, but they said that if there's anything above and beyond that we could let them know and they could give us some direction on.
Okay. I do remember the first time, I think a group of us went to Charlottesville. I don't know how many of the current board members were there at that meeting, but I think there was an opportunity to talk about certain systems at that time that were in need of either redefining or re-engineering to make things work a little more smoothly. So just a suggestion, it's certainly your training, but my experience is they are a good resource for sharing practices that may work well elsewhere instead of leaving us to try to invent something.
So the board item for future agenda, I'm not sure that we really need the VSBA to tell us what we need to discuss. The CTE, for example, I would like to have it discussed before the capital improvement plan so we can actually put it on the capital improvement plans for whatever buildings will be necessary or rehabbing buildings that are necessary so we can plan for that and what the CTE is going to look like. The subcommittees could have met by Zoom. They're not bound by a law that requires an open meeting for them. So I don't know why that hadn't happened. But these items for future agenda are things what the King George County School Board wants to move forward with in the future, and to do means to do. Let's get something done.
I tend to agree with Mr. Collins that I don't think we need training to figure out how we want to decide what we want to talk about. I think we've already spent a lot of time talking about how we want to plan to figure out what we want to talk about. And it seems like this would have been a good opportunity to have a work session, maybe before now, and the amount of time we've had between meetings, especially over the summer, since we decided earlier on to not have meetings over the summer, specifically because we said we could have ad hoc meetings when we thought that was appropriate, which we haven't done. So I think we could figure it out at something like a work session where we just intelligently discussed what we thought we wanted to accomplish as a board.
The VSBA board development training is a completely separate item. That's for.
I don't think Dr. Vincent was talking about the VSBA telling us what to put on an agenda. I think it was the process of how we determine how to do a to-do list. I also think
And what goes on the to-do list?
It's
Who's
not that
responsible for that
complicated.
to-do list?
but how the process works.
Right.
Not what
Just a
to put on,
recommendation.
but how we determine what to put on there. And I also think that,
The process is not that complicated, Ms. Tolliver.
well, apparently it is, because we've been talking about it for 6 months.
That's what I'm talking
That's the
about.
point.
Apparently it's complicated. And additionally,
You're correct. You're correct, Ms. Tolliver. I was not suggesting the VSBA determine the topics. Just if they knew of a system for, communication within the board in terms of having agenda items advanced or considered for future agendas, just that process of that system might be useful or a useful topic to explore with VSBA's guidance, but certainly not what locally should be a priority to go on the agenda. That was not at all what I was trying to suggest, just the process.
can I also say that we rarely meet twice a month in the summer, and particularly in this time, the way things have been since March, I'm not sure that our having a work session to discuss our agendas when the staff and the superintendent are tasked with way bigger things than what we're going to talk about in a future agenda in November or December.
Just because we have a meeting to talk about what we want to put on future agendas does not mean it has to burden Dr. Benson or the staff. It could be a discussion for the board.
I don't understand the need, the current kind of urgency for to-do lists for future agendas when we have let people figure out how school's going to open. We don't really have a whole lot to discuss right now. What are we going to talk about in December? We don't even know if we're going to have school in December. So I think we need to just take it one day at a time right now and let things blow the way they're flowing with the people that need to figure it out.
I don't think the key to success is waiting to find out what we're going to need to worry about in December, because I think at the meeting in January when we specifically discussed that we didn't need meetings and that we could have meetings to discuss things, I think this is a perfect example of how we could have had more metions to do things like discuss how schools were going to reopen, and we haven't capitalized on that.
I think that what's important is, that we're going to move forward, and, it's a different time right now. I think, all the boards have struggled with this. It's been very quiet. There's a lot of uncertainty. Nobody really knows what direction we're moving. We don't know where we're going to be in December. Back in March, we didn't know we were going to be here. So that was one of the reasons why, I wanted to at least put something down in writing so that we knew what we needed to go and what path we were going to try to go on to, and then just kind of filter everything else in there. So, I hear what everybody's saying, and I'm thinking that, if we just move forward with this process, that it will just make everybody feel a little bit more comfortable and kind of get rid of the little bit of the unknown, because I think right now, since March, that's what we've been living, is nothing but the unknown. You know, we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. We don't know what next week is going to bring. And I think that if we at least have a plan or an outlook and an objective of where we're going to move forward or where we're going to try to move forward, then we can actually move forward and feel like we're doing something. So that was the purpose of it.
And we haven't even approved the budget yet, so we can't even talk about something
Right.
that we're approved funding. We're not even there yet.
Right.
You can always talk about things before they're funded. That's
Yes,
what you do.
I agree.
Okay. Are we ready to move on?
Matt, can I ask one last, make a comment? So in the spirit of moving things forward, could I offer to take a stab at drafting a process for coming up with how to address board items for future agendas that we could discuss? I could put it together and send it to the board, and then if we liked it, we could discuss it as a discussion item at a future meeting?
We'll be glad to assist you.
Sure.
But that's kind of like
Sure.
bringing it to the board to decide whether they're going to put on there, the chairman decides whether it goes on the agenda or not. But I don't have a problem with the to-do or the
Yeah,
board
I'm
items
not
for the
really.
future, but
We have things that come up throughout the year, throughout the month, throughout the week. We have things that are time sensitive, as policies and VSBA things, and so someone just falls into place. I don't know what's so difficult about saying during the board comment or contacting the chair and saying, I'd like to discuss this at a future meeting. Why does this become so complicated?
I think the issue,
We spent 50 minutes talking about what to put on the future agenda.
I think the issue really is not as much the future agenda planning as the to-do list. And I think no, they're not. They're not the same thing. And the to-do list is an ongoing structure of what we are planning or needing to look at this year. I think it's a useful item. It shouldn't have taken this long to discuss. I don't see why we can't maintain and it does, the to-do list comes out of the agenda. And it is a normal process, a continuous flow. And I think a couple of statements from Ms. Gonzalez to bring to the board would be very appropriate and get this off the agenda and be done with.
Okay, so let me just ask you this. Ms. Hawk, what would you put on the to-do list?
What would I put on the to-do list?
Yes, right now.
I would put the items that are still outstanding.
Which are?
Updates from the Potomac expansion, the updates from the middle school expansion.
So those would all be agenda items that Dr. Benson has throughout. So that's part of the CIP,
So that's part of his
right?
update, generally speaking, at every meeting when he does instruction updates and that kind of thing.
Right.
They are haphazard, and that's not a negative. He updates us from time to time, but it is not a regular update.
So then we would put that on the future agenda items to be discussed so that Dr. Benson can prepare in September, right?
That's a difference.
Yeah, so,
But the to-do list became something that during, like, people talk about things during board comment or during a meeting and kind of fall by the wayside. So you created this to-do list so that things would get written on paper and somebody would say, oh, yeah, remember we talked about that 2 months ago.
Yes.
What are we doing about that now?
Yes.
But the basic stuff, like, Dr. Benson can only update us on the Potomac expansion or middle school expansion as he gets information. That doesn't happen every single month. So if you want that to be on the agenda, that's different than a to-do list, in my opinion. The to-do list got to be 4 pages long, very cumbersome. Nothing ever came off of it, and it just was a lot of work when it could have just been simpler. I agree a to-do list can be efficient and effective, but not the way we were doing it before. So again, I don't know why it's so complicated.
Well, and I
Remember
think,
to check on this.
and
That's all it is.
we're using valuable board time right now that, yes, I agree, and I think it's something that can be simplified by a structure to say, this is a motion and this is a to-do list, and then that leads into the agenda. I don't see the complication.
I also don't see why it's, from Dr. Benson's suggestion about VSBA, if other counties, other divisions use something like a to-do list, if we can see what that looks like, it might simplify our complicated conversation.
okay, so let's move on. All right, so the next discussion item is an alternate July meeting date. If we could just go ahead and schedule one in case we need one. Is any alternate July? So currently, right now, we have July 27th as a date.
If we need it.
If we need it. This is just for if we need it, just so that, you know, at the last minute, Ms. Bushrod and myself aren't calling around trying to figure out what we're doing. So is July 27th. So most of our board meetings are on Mondays, and we have July 6th, the 13th, and the 20th.
I'm going to suggest July 13th.
I would be in favor of July 13th. Anybody have anything planned for the 13th?
I would ask for the 6th if possible. I will be at the beach on the 13th. I'm happy to call in remotely, but if we could do it on the 6th, I would prefer that.
Okay, so it doesn't matter. All right. Mr. Collins?
I don't have a job. I'm available anytime.
Okay, all right, so we're going to just put the 6th and the 13th on there, because I'm tentatively, I have something planned for the 6th, but that's okay, it's very tentative. So at this point, we can just say the 6th is our first choice, and then the 13th will be our second. We could, I mean, yeah, Ms. Gonzalez, that would be an option,
That's what I said.
yes,
So
okay. Okay.
you got to make sure it's properly posted, that's all. Whatever
Yes,
the date is.
and that was the thing, you know, the reason why I wanted to kind of bring it up a little bit, that I didn't want, I mean, we have 3 days to post it. If we have to have one at the last minute, I want to make sure that we have at least some options, and I'm not, like we have when we have our student hearings, sometimes we're making several calls trying to pick out several dates just to get us all together, or personnel, right, correct.
So when are we going to decide on that date by? When is it going to be solidified?
So we just kind of did solidify it, that we're going to go with the 6th. If we need a meeting, an extra meeting in
Sounded
July,
like the
that we'll
6th
go
or
with
the
the 6th.
13th to me.
And if that doesn't work, then we'll have the 13th. Just wanted to verify that people are available for those 2 dates, that we can make it work if that's necessary.
So we're going to have a meeting at the end of this week?
Well, let's go on down to the information items, and we can discuss, once we discuss the budget.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just to make sure, did you all move the budget to discussion? Is that an added discussion item tonight?
Yeah, so I was thinking it was an information item, but I guess it will be a discussion item, so that would be our next item. We want to discuss the budget. Is there anything you wanted to talk about the budget, Dr. Benson?
I do. I have, and Mr. Dines, if you're able to, could you allow me to share the screen, and I can try to summarize for the board. Madam Chair, I don't know if you're getting the same messages. I see some of our online guests are chatting, asking about the opening of school or the plan. Is that part of the agenda? I do have under information, another presentation to update, obviously the board and our public about plans that are being made for the fall, our planning process thus far, and key benchmarks in the not too distant future in terms of progressing. So for those who are texting in or chatting in, just stay tuned. Okay. Bear with me 1 second while I learn how to share my screen here.
Oh, I was told I couldn't mute it. I guess that was not true. Who knew? Oh, thank you. I thought they could. I agree. I told them I couldn't mute it. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Get it right. Sorry, folks. Thank you.
You get it, Dr. Benson?
I think so. Did it just come out? Yes. Is it sharing now?
Yes.
Okay.
Not on our screen.
I think I figured it out. Okay, so very quickly, Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for this opportunity. Just to backtrack a little bit, we last left our budget, or our proposed budget, with a presentation to the Board of Supervisors, as is traditional. And since then, or that evening, I guess, the Board of Supervisors made an ovation to a consensus agreement to advertise for public hearing an amount of local funding equal to $300,000 less than the current year's local effort. So with that said, they advertised for their public hearing. They held a public hearing. I believe they actually held a second public hearing to ensure fidelity with that process. And then ultimately they did grant or approve a motion to do just as they had come to consensus in the first meeting with us. So with that said, obviously then our request of local funding was reduced dramatically locally. And we also learned, and for our public, keep in mind we developed this budget in January, February of the current year, which was really our last normal. We have now advanced into our next normal, and we hope to get back to what is normal. But in the meantime, we had an interesting budget year in that we developed the budget under certain assumptions that were drastically changed by the time we presented to Board of Supervisors. And so now both the state revenue and the local revenue picture have changed. Our state revenue was reduced by about $500,000, and that was primarily due to the fact that the governor eliminated all new spending, whether it was legislated, as was the case with the counselors or the additional counselors that was proposed. But at any rate, he did remain or allow for the re-benchmarking to remain in the state budget, but did nix any new spending initiatives that was part of the public education budget. So consequently, our state revenue declined by that $500,000 that you see there. So combined, that obviously left us with a gap to address. And I did email the board prior to, but I was becoming anxious, and I know many of our employees were anxious about the status of their employment for the next year. And so I appreciate the board's support. We did issue contracts to employees for next school year. We maintained the same salary as the current fiscal year. And so that is an adjustment in the budget to bring us to a balanced status. I do know of other school divisions that are doing similarly, but are hoping to then revisit perhaps halfway through the fiscal year any ability to compensate or to move employees in terms of a longevity step, perhaps in the middle of the year, once our revenue sources, particularly the sales tax, and we had some good news about the lottery, that it seemed like they were going to meet projections for the remainder of this fiscal year. So once we know better how our revenue is coming in, we can then perhaps revisit things in December for fiscal year 21, even though at that point we'll be well underway developing the budget for fiscal year 22. So that was the primary reduction in our budget. The second, in concert or in accord with the governor's eliminating new spending out of the budget, any new positions we recommended, except for those that we know will be required for us to comply with services for our students who have special needs. And again, our obligation to provide those services is mandated under IDEA. So there were 5 total positions. There's actually 6. I'll add one more. But from an instructional standpoint, there were 3 special education teachers that are needed to deliver services absolutely next year. There are 2 pairs there, one at the preschool and Steelston. My apologies, I left off that we did maintain a custodial position for the middle school given the expanded facilities and square footage with the renovation. We've left that one custodial position at the middle school. Those were the 2 primary reductions. Employing those reductions then actually brought us to an amount of $28,371. And then again, we've referenced the CARES funding that arrived late in the budget game, so to speak. I would recommend to the board not only these reductions to make our budget balanced, but also to hold in reserve that $28,000 and to be judicious about the use of the CARES funding, since we are quite uncertain about sales tax and the revenue that will be realized through the sales tax disbursements by the state. We just have to see how that plays out here in the early months of the fiscal year, because the revenue tool, as I've talked with you all about before, the revenue tool at the state did not adjust for this next normal in terms of our current economy. And if sales tax revenue falls short, then what was projected will not be realized, and we could potentially be then left with a hole in our budget that we would be hard pressed to address, given that everybody would be hired and working, and we would be obligated to pay those employees. So those are the two reduction strategies I recommend to you. And then, of course, I do recommend we hold in reserve the $28,000 and be judicious with the CARES funding that we have in front of us. I will mention that in addition to the school division CARES Act funding, there's an additional amount of CARES funding that has been distributed to localities, local governments, and I believe there's more than $2 million that's been distributed to King George local government, and certainly part of that can be used to address local educational needs as well. So perhaps, together with our board, we can entertain a discussion about how together we can pool funds to do what's needed for our citizens and our children in King George while leveraging the CARES funding, whether it be school allocated or county allocated. But at any rate, I'll leave that for your consideration. One other thing, I certainly was not, it went on action for tonight simply because it is just an adjustment to the budget you've already approved. You're taking action on. So we've traditionally just left it on action once we come back to try to balance it. I'm happy to entertain any questions or feedback you have. Happy to do any more research or figuring you would like, and bring it back to you for your final consideration before next fiscal year. Thank you all.
How much was the step increase?
Dr. Benson, did you hear that?
I did not, Mr. Collins. I'm sorry. I heard how much was it or something.
How much was the step increase?
Total value, dollars.
The total value of the step increase, which you have eliminated on this proposal.
We'd have to calculate that for all employees before I hazard a guess at what the actual dollar figure associated with the step would be. But we can do that, and certainly we would need to do that if the board chose to revisit that topic, at a midpoint in a year or so.
Yes, I certainly agree that we need to know how much it is that we would be looking at, and we need to know, we need for our staff to know that we will try to come up with that, because I think that's so essential to know that at least something is in the planning if it's possible.
Absolutely agree, and I appreciate the support for our staff.
Well, in the bad times is when you want to help folks out. Some staff members have people that are unemployed in their household, and we need to do everything we can to keep their salary competitive. And just because it's a bad time doesn't mean that you need to give up on that.
Dr. Benson, was there any carryover funds at all? Were there any carryover funds left?
I'll check with Ms. Williams. I know that the county ran the last accrued payroll just a couple of days ago, so she would then have to look in and see if there was any residual amount in our fund balance for fiscal year 20. I don't believe there's a tremendous amount, because we were I was adjudicating expenditure by expenditure here at the end. Given the reduction, we did experience a reduction in sales tax revenue, as I talked about, even in this current fiscal year. I was talking about next year, but even this current fiscal year, we're seeing a reduction in sales tax disbursements from the state. And of course, they will then disperse or accrue back by 2 months, July and August. They will accrue back into our budget. However, what has been predicted for those 2 months may very well differ in a negative way for those 2 months, what is actually realized.
Well, I guess we'll see. Although with the economy opening up, perhaps the sales tax will be increasing. We certainly would like to be aware of it as we go along.
Dr. Benson, is the localities CARES Act money based on sales tax as well?
Forgive me, is the locality sales
Well,
tax
so that $2.3 million that was allocated to King George County, is that based on sales tax as well, or is that figure solid?
No, I think you're referring to the 2.3 in CARES Act funding for the county that I referenced?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, no, that is grant money from the federal government under the CARES Act.
Okay, thank you.
That's not for the school board.
I know it's not the school.
But we need to make sure that if we need to be asking the Board of Supervisors for that money, for example, for a step increase, then we need to get our request in sooner than later because everybody else is going to be requesting things also.
That's why.
Yes.
Yeah, that would not, a compensation for employees, I do not believe would qualify as an expenditure for that federal grant money. It would have to be COVID-related expenses. Just as the school division's federal grant money was limited to certain types of expenditures, so too is the county. But you are correct that that money can be pulled or can be utilized. And I believe the county's money needs to be expended by December of this year. So any needs that emerge as a result of our planning or any needs in our community to facilitate instruction, we could certainly advance a voice to the county advocating for the use of some of that funding.
So it's my understanding when I talked to one of the Board of Supervisors is that that funding has to be used directly to staff for overtime and anything that is directly related to COVID cleanup or something. He went into great detail, yeah, and we did not, we didn't meet any of the requirements for that. So I think I want to try to wrap my head around this. Essentially, Dr. Benson, you took what we had proposed originally and approved, and you took our budget from last year and said, okay, this is our budget from last year. This is what we are pretty much mandated to do. And after you took that, we only had a reserve of $28,000. So I guess my big question is, is there any wiggle room, or do we have anything that we could do differently with this budget?
Let me back up and make sure that we're clear. This is the budget the proposed budget for fiscal 21 that you all approved to advance to the Board of Supervisors in March. So it's not, when you say last year's budget, it's not the current fiscal year's budget simply moved forward, if that's what you were thinking?
No, I'm saying that everything.
The Board of Supervisors.
Yes.
Once they indicated their funding level and once the governor's amendments went through the General Assembly, then we received a new calc tool for revenue from the state. All I did then was take the budget you had approved and sent to the Board of Supervisors and employed the two adjustments that I explained previously, which then dropped the dollar amount in terms of expenditures below our projected funding by $28,000. Does that help clear up?
Yeah, so I was just trying to make a
process.
I think I was trying to clarify that the budget that we have in order, our base operating budget that we need to move forward this year, that is pretty much set and been approved on, that we've taken that amount of the monies that we've already approved, and then we've added to that what is pretty much mandated by the state, and that is the budget that you've proposed. And with that, we have a $28,371 reserve. So if we were to come back at a later date, whether before July 1st, are there any adjustments that we as board members would be able to make to those figures? That's what I'm asking.
Well, certainly to the expenditure side, if there are things you want considered or believe need to be reconsidered, that's my job, is to take your input, go back and see if there's a way we can reconsider. I do believe moving forward, again, we are in kind of unprecedented times right now, and that as we continue to plan this summer, there may be needs that we would want to shift, planned expenditures that we planned for, back in February, March, or even January, that have now emerged as a greater priority. We may need to shift within the budget that you all approved. But to get us out of the door into July 1 next fiscal year, we have amended, and the lion's share of the amendment was simply the staff salaries, and that is I think that's very much in line with neighboring school divisions, that they too are hoping to revisit in the middle of the year any kind of longevity step or portion of a step to try to, as Mr. Collins said, remain competitive, but more importantly, to compensate employees for the hard work they're doing, and will continue to do into the fall as we adjust our instructional design.
So the amount that we're getting from the state is $47,879 this year, and how much did we get from last year?
This came by
45, and it's million.
It's million, not 1,000, right? 47 million.
Yeah, that's what.
If you'll give me 1 second, Mr. Collins, I believe, okay.
Yeah, it was.
You mentioned state revenue in 1920. I have it as 26,608.
No.
26 million, I'm sorry, 608,000.
I think
For 2019?
47.
I think
And
47
then
is
for
the
20
total operating budget,
And
isn't
then
it?
I have for 2021 would be 28,055, 230. And that was a reduction of just over 500,000 from the very first, or from the General Assembly's approved budget and the governor's amendments once the COVID epidemic became evident.
So last year, King George schools realized from the state funds was how much?
Sorry, I just put it away. Let me try to pull it back up.
Didn't we realize more funding this year than last year?
There is more state funding this year. That is correct, and that's due to the maintain the re-benchmarking. In other words, the salary increases for teachers that the General Assembly enacted in that previous biennial budget, they baked that in and they rolled it forward into the next biennial budget, which caused the increase in state funding. And there was great worry that would be, they would retreat on that, but they maintained that while approving the governor's recommendation to eliminate any new spending caused by legislation or otherwise.
So King George County schools realized how much more money than last year from the state?
We are projected to realize 1.446 million more from the state this coming fiscal year. But again, there is a huge asterisk on that, Mr. Collins, in that part of that money is sales tax disbursement. And if our economy as a state remains down on a downtick, then that figure will not, we potentially will not meet that figure because the actual disbursements from the state will be less than what was predicted.
So there's.
But what is predicted in terms of an increase in state revenue is in fact 1.4 million or so. And of course, the local effort has declined by 300,000.
So it's declined by 300,000, and there's 5 positions for the IDEA. I can't imagine that would fill that gap. So are there other expenditures in that amount of money? In other words, basically, can we fit in the step increase?
We ran it with a step increase and eliminating the COLA But no, it did not get us close to the needed cut. But again, my hope would be that if we do realize better sales tax revenue, then perhaps the board then could utilize that residual amount, the 20-some thousand, plus any other amount to revisit the step at that point.
So those 5 positions, what's their value in dollars? I don't have that. You gave it to us a while back. I don't have that in front of me.
Yep.
What's the value?
1 second here. I have to give you an estimate, but I do have a chart here.
3 teachers, 2 paraprofessionals.
Yeah.
We have to keep the paraprofessionals, though, don't we?
3,
Yeah, we're keeping them.
Yes, we have to keep the 2 paraprofessionals.
240.
Oh, you're asking for on this.
40 plus 270. Maybe 300,000, Mr. Collins, with benefits in that ballpark.
Okay.
In that range.
So that's 300,000, and then minus 300,000 from the county. That's 600,000. Am I correct?
I didn't hear everything you said there. It's minus 300,000.
So it's 300. It costs 300,000 for these positions, approximately, and we know it's 300,000 from the county reduction. So that's 600,000, and we realize 1.46 million more from the state this year. I'm trying to figure out where that money is.
Well, remember you've got a VRS. I think we had about a $500,000 VRS employer share increase, and then you had some other stuff that was an increased cost for which there wasn't straight offsetting dollars.
So, Mr. Collins, I think that
I can go back. I can certainly break it down. If you would like me to do some more breakdown in terms of that, I can work with Sherry to try to give you exactly where the difference is. I see your point, but I do know there are other costs that we're not including. It's not as simple as the math you're presenting to account for the difference. And I could also, at the same time, and we'll need to calculate the approximate cost of a step for employees.
Well, obviously, I have a big interest in that. Well, I also have an interest in the COLA, but can't be really visited till December. But I would like to revisit the cost of living. I mean, excuse me, the step increase.
Okay.
So, Mr. Collins, I mean, the 3 special teachers and the 2 paraprofessionals, those are positions that we have to
That's $300,000. So the state, we realized 1.46 more than we did last year from the state. So, and then we got a reduction of 300,000 from the county from last year, and it's approximately cost $300,000 for these 5 employees.
So if we go back to our original budget, it was pretty descriptive as far as what was increased and needed based across the board for each school and for the whole division. So are you suggesting that you're going to go through and look at the other extra 600,000 or 700,000 to see if we can?
But he just
cut
said
somewhere else?
$500,000 increase in VRS, so there's not another 600, 700,000.
I know that's kind of what my point
600,000
is.
And $500,000 comes to $1.2 million.
Well,
Two
that's
primary areas. One I know was the employer VRS increase,
We'd all like to see more.
which was expensive, and then the other was we had several employees move to our insurance who previously did not elect to take our insurance, moved to the insurance, which, while we had a 0% increase in the premiums, we did have an increase on the employer side for those that elected to take our insurance who previously had not done so. And I'm going strictly off memory from, I think, that first budget presentation that I provided. But nonetheless, I can certainly go back and I can work with Sherry to try to account for that extra that I think you're referring to, Mr. Collins. Not extra, but the amount that off the top of the head, we would need to determine where that funding has been applied to cover costs.
okay.
And if so, if that funding, where it's applied, can it be applied for a step increase instead? That's probably my question.
And in the case of VRS, no, it could not be transferred from there. But you know, beyond that, then, you know, that's, you'd have to look elsewhere, you know, reduce somewhere else to try to afford a step, that type of thing.
Right.
So I think the first important thing to do is to see how much the step increase would be, because right now we're looking at $600,000 or $700,000 that you're going to have to go through all of the school, the entire division, and try to, you know, squeeze that out, which I think is a daunting task. I mean, I feel pretty confident in looking at the budget before and where you are now that this is pretty much our best option, and there is no other option unless we take more time and try to squeeze $1,000 out of copy paper and $1,000 out of cleaning supplies. I just don't see us really getting there.
We don't have time.
And we don't really have a whole lot of time, and
Well,
the staff doesn't have a whole lot of time to chase 3% of the budget. That's
So
why I'm just having an issue.
that's another point. We don't have a whole lot of time. You know, we should have had another meeting in June.
If there's not, so I can go back, because I know that we ran a budget without the COLA and with the step increase. I have a note, and I want to verify it with Sherry tomorrow before, but I do have a note to myself. This step was in the neighborhood of a $720,000 cost for a step for the full year.
Okay.
But again, I'll verify that with Sherry tomorrow. But I know one of the versions that we, in trying to create recommendations for you, I did look at, were we able to save the step and do away with the COLA, but it simply was too costly to accomplish with the other needs we had in the budget.
I mean, the Board of Supervisors just approved the budget last week, and before that, we were still up in the air. So I don't know that we could have approved a budget any sooner than we are right now. But are there any more questions for Dr. Benson? Okay, so I guess we need to set it
We going to proceed or set another meeting date or?
that's what I was going to say. I guess we need to set another meeting date to approve the budget. That will be more than likely exactly what we have before us, but.
I'm out of town the rest of the week.
How about Friday?
I'm out of town for the rest of the week.
I'm available whenever.
You can do it virtually, Ms. Tolliver.
I'm available. I would prefer a day other than Friday, but I can be available.
So I guess the big question is, Dr. Benson, when do you think you and your staff will be able to get this information? Dr. Benson, are you still with us? I think we've lost Dr. Benson. Yes, there you go. So I just asked, when do you think that you could get this information that Mr. Collins has requested?
I'll begin tomorrow afternoon. I think that we could probably have that by the end of the day, Wednesday. So I think I heard you talk about Friday. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. If that provides board members with enough time to review whatever we come up with.
Can we do Thursday instead of
Friday.
No, we have to have a 3-day notice. Do we still have to have a 3-day notice? Is that correct?
Today's Monday.
today's Monday?
For a meeting, in order to have a meeting, we have to have 3 days' notice. So if you get us, I mean, we need to post the Friday now and just hope that
I thought it was 48 hours.
we get, I thought it was 3 days. 3 days for a meeting? Ms. Bushrod, we have to post 3 days for a meeting. So if we have a meeting set for
3 days to
Friday, really,
48
that's the
hours.
soonest we can do it, correct? You post it tomorrow, that's 3 days?
When is the first?
Can you do it during the day?
But I'm saying if Dr. Benson can say that the staff can get everything ready for Wednesday, that would give us a day and a half to approve or to review it. So you could post tomorrow. So the soonest that we could actually have a meeting would be Friday.
Correct.
So that's the soonest we could have the meeting.
There'd only be one item on the agenda.
Or not.
There'll only be
What'd you
one
say,
item
Mr.
on the agenda.
What?
There'll only be one item on the agenda.
Well, I would imagine.
Okay, so I guess we need to have a motion that we're going to have another meeting on Friday to approve the agenda, or
Friday
to
the 26th.
not approve the agenda, to approve the budget. Yes. Can I have a motion?
I move that we meet on Friday, the 26th at 6 p.m. for a meeting to discuss the budget.
Second.
To approve the budget?
To discuss, I guess we still have to
Discussion.
discuss, it's still a discussion. All right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, chair votes aye. Motion's moved. We will have a budget meeting on Friday at 6 o'clock. How that will be conducted, I guess, Ms. Bushrod, if you wouldn't mind setting up and letting us know how you want that done. All right, what everybody's been waiting for. Can we move on to information items? First item is committee report. Anybody have a committee report? To get any of the committees have been meeting? Okay, all right, Dr. Benson, the next item is the 2021 planning update.
Okay, thank you. Again, Chris Hines, if you're there, I'm needing to share my screen, I guess.
Okay.
You can give me those rights again.
It's still there.
I still have them.
Yeah.
Is that everybody that's online?
Because it wasn't, okay, maybe it's happening now.
We have about 35 people online, that's great.
Okay, is it sharing on your end? Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Dines. I appreciate your assistance. Okay, so let me see if I can get the presentation over here. Okay, so tonight I appreciate the board's patience. The staff has been working diligently. As you know, every Tuesday, and Thursday for a while there, I was, we continue to meet with the state superintendent over the phone call, and that's all superintendents throughout the state. We stay in touch that way. We then follow up with a regional meeting. All the superintendents in Region 3 meet to discuss pertinent issues, and then following that meeting, I jump on with our central staff and other staff to further distill the information that's received on a weekly basis. Just a little over a week ago, we received the release of the governor's plan for reopening schools. And I'm going to talk about that, but before I talk about the 3R plan that was released, I want to, because there's a lot of speculation, there's a lot of discussion and publicity, and as one of our public speakers mentioned, we all stand tuned with neighboring school divisions about schedules, what it could look like, what it may look like, in hopes of what we may be able to do come fall. But the reality is that we are really tied to the phased reopening of Virginia, which is also aligned with now the recovery, redesign, restart, or the 3R plan that the governor has released in terms of schools and school facilities. So I want to say up front, because this really is the guiding goal, that our goal is to provide instructional and related services to our students. And we're going to aim to maximize the in-person instructional time and minimizing exposure risk for our students and staff. That is really what is going to guide our ship and our decision process. And we are certainly going to solicit input from families. I'm going to talk and show you a draft family questionnaire that we're ready to issue tomorrow, but I wanted to run it by you all prior to its release. And then also in a few days we'll have another version that's very similar but adds questions in terms of perceived professional development needs and that type of thing, soliciting input from our teachers. So with that said, we have our goal. That is kind of where we point our compass, and we we march onward trying to accomplish that goal. We have guideposts as well. And those guideposts are in the document that was released, that 3R document, about 100 and some pages, that provides different information pertaining to the different phases of the governor's proposed reopening of Virginia schools. So I want to talk a little bit about the 3R because that is the basis of our work thus far. And I think it's important if our public and our teachers and staff, if you've not had an opportunity to access it, you can go to the Virginia Department of Education website, and they have this document, and they have some other support documents in addition to a brand new FAQ listing that they are using to communicate answers to frequently asked questions pertaining to the reopening of schools, contrary to the FAQ that they were maintaining, which addressed issues and questions pertaining to the closure of schools this past school year. But the 3R program, the 3R plan, it does align with the Forward Virginia Blueprint and the phases that are contained in the Forward Virginia Blueprint. The 3R plan does scale up opportunities for in-person instruction, beginning immediately when we got it. And currently we are in phase 2 of that, which does allow us to have interaction with individual students, albeit according to other guidelines associated with the CDC and the Virginia Health Department. The 3R program, it does prioritize needs associated with our most vulnerable learners, that being our students with special needs, and also our youngest learners, kindergarten through 3rd grade learners. And then it does attempt to address the health and the social, emotional, and physical well-being of our students and staff by providing guidelines by which we will need to then define our capacity and what our possible schedules and what our delivery of services might look like or will look like come fall. But again, I believe firmly that we're going to go through this process. I'm going to talk with you about actions we've taken thus far and where we are in that process. But I believe the process is going to reveal to us eventually the schedule that is going to help us best accomplish that goal as far as maximizing in-person instruction with our students until we can get back to normal, so to speak. All right, so let me talk more about phase 2 with the 3R plan. As I mentioned, again, it does allow in-person instruction for our special education programs and our preschool through 3rd grade students and our English language learners. We are now able to, and I believe Parks and Rec is looking to offer is starting summer camps in our schools, in our facilities, albeit in accordance with a health plan that we needed to help them in developing and publicizing and submitting to the state. And again, I'm going to talk about that in just a few slides. However, we have to observe the social distancing measures on both buses and in buildings if we use buses for these summer programs. And very quickly, you see in phase 2, those criteria that align closely with the Virginia reopening plan. So phase 3, and we've been advised, nobody knows for certain, but we've been advised that we do fully expect to be in phase 3 come the beginning of the school year. So we are utilizing the criteria of phase 3, which are more, which allow a greater amount of time, a greater opportunity for in-person instruction than phase 2. If we need to scale back to phase 2, I believe it's certainly much easier to scale back what we plan than to plan for phase 2 and then suddenly be forced into trying to provide resources and options for students under phase 3. But phase 3 does expand instructional opportunities for in-person instruction for all students, not just our preschool through 3rd grade and special needs learners. It does, and no doubt it will predicate the need for remote instruction to supplement the in-person instruction for students. It does allow for childcare before and after schools. In our case, we have the before and after school programs offered through Parks and Rec. And again, we will be developing a health plan in combination with an academic plan for if we were to offer services under phase 3. But you'll see that the capacity the transportation capacity is really going to be a key factor in defining how many students we can get to school and teach at one time. Another factor is the size of the classrooms and how we can situate students so that they are distant from one another to minimize any risk of transfer. And that's what phase 3 looks like. And you see the safety considerations down there at the bottom. As far as athletics and extracurricular activities, phase 3 does allow for some of those activities to begin. Actually, phase 2 allows for some of the conditioning and that type of thing to take place, but with a different set of CDC recommendations. But anyway, I'm not here to go into VHSL activities. There may be a question and follow-up information I can provide you next time we're together, but I do want to talk about what we as a county have done and are continuing to do currently to move us towards the fall. I talked about these plans, and one criteria or one requirement is that for both phases 2 and 3, prior to initiating services with school-age children in our buildings, every school division must develop and publicize on their website and submit at the same time to the DOE a health plan. And that health plan simply describes the activities going to be taking place. Also requires a description of how we're going to adhere to the recommended guidelines for minimizing exposure risk for our children and our staff. As I mentioned before, phase 3 requires an academic plan as well as a health plan. So we will be working towards a July 24th. It's really the 26th, but we certainly want to have completed before July 24th both our academic plan and our health plan required of the state as we prepare for an opening come August 10th. All right. So King George County planning steps and actions that we've taken. As soon as the governor released the 3R plan, we initiated 6 different work groups, and those work groups initially consisted of 2 persons per group. These were facilitators that I assigned. I tasked them with taking the document, the 3R document that had been published, to consume that and to go through that document, and then to create, as a starting point, to brainstorm and create all of the assumptions and the questions that we needed to answer in order to provide instruction, provide school for our students, but in a way that was within the guidelines that have been published by the 3R plan. So we've got a transportation and human resources group, technology and risk management. We have 2 instructional designs. It's split by K-8 and 9-12, preschool and special needs, and then a health, wellness, and nutrition group. So those 6 groups then met together, and they brainstormed about 20 pages worth of questions and assumptions that we needed to challenge to initiate this process. Right now, they're tasked with expanding the work group, the membership of those work groups, in such a way that will allow them to answer the questions they came up with. And then they were also tasked with reviewing and collaboratively developing this family questionnaire and soon a staff questionnaire, so that we can capture data we need from our families, first and foremost, to answer several of the questions related to transportation and instructional design. So again, they generated all these questions and assumptions. They have completed that process, and we have completed the development of our questionnaire that we would like to issue to families tomorrow. It's a format of a Google form, and it would be alerted using our school messenger system so that we could push for a 100% response rate if at all possible. In fact, we'll need to contact families, particularly with that transportation information, to help calculate our absolute capacity per run, so to speak. So if you can hang on for 1 second, at this point I think it's appropriate for me to share with you the actual draft survey so you can take a look. I'm going to stop sharing this document for a second. I believe, Chris, is that right? And I want to start sharing another. Okay, did that come up on the screen?
Not yet.
Yeah?
No, it has not.
Not yet? Okay. How about now?
Yep, there we go.
Okay. Okay, I want to make sure I got the right one up, but no, this is incorrect. I've got a couple versions. Let me go back. Sorry, I appreciate your patience. Okay. Now I gotta find you guys again. Here we are.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Looks like the beginning of a letter there with, can you see that?
Yes, there's a letter present.
Fantastic. Thanks for bearing with me. So this is the questionnaire in draft form that I wanted to share with you this evening. It begins with an introduction to our families, explaining that Governor, just exactly what I talked about, that Governor Northam has provided guidance to us regarding the reopening of schools, and we hyperlink then the Virginia 3R plan should they want to take a look at that. It goes on to say the following questionnaire seeks your feedback as King George County School plans for the upcoming school year. Please complete a separate questionnaire for each child in your family. That way the responses could, and we certainly expect them to be different, to reflect the different needs of their different children. We do plan to leave this questionnaire open through Saturday, but we do ask they not delay beyond Saturday so that we can continue our planning process, because the transportation aspect is one that's almost customized. We need to go back to the drawing board in terms of routes, look at the equipment we have, look at the seating arrangement that we hope to be able to employ, and use all that as our calculus for determining how many students we can transport in one shift, so to speak, at each school. For face-to-face instruction. Again, we're trying to maximize the opportunity for in-person instruction for our students while operating within the guidelines predicated by that 3R plan. We do make reference because we know we have staff members who also have children in our schools, so we make a reference to staff that, hey, this is what we need you to complete for your children. In a few days, we'll have one to gain your perspective as a staff member. So we wanted to qualify that. The questions begin with just strictly some demographic, which school does this child attend, which grade level, and again, we wanted to find out or gauge if there are families that are electing not to have their students return in face of the COVID. Sorry, is that us or is that I'm picking up? I don't know if that's questions or.
I think there's some people that are online that have their mics on. If everybody could just mute their mics for a moment, please. You're muting them. Thank you.
Okay. And then we start getting into the preferences and questions pertaining to their what they would prefer to see in terms of meeting their child's needs. The top three priorities. And then we get into, I'm going to give you a chance to read through, I don't want to scroll too quickly. We explained that given the parameters of the 3-hour program, we will need to reopen with some with social distancing in effect, which is undoubtedly going to impact how we can offer school for families. So with that said, then we propose or we put out there just some possible schedules or just some ways that we brainstorm that we could possibly utilize hours of the day, again, with the goal being to maximize in-person instruction for our students. So none of these, it's not to be taken that any one of these will eventually be the schedule. As I mentioned before, I'm truly hoping that the schedule will emerge through our work, that we don't pick a schedule in a knee-jerk fashion or through kind of a popularity contest, and then try to make things meet that schedule. Because if we did it that way, we would certainly, or we may very well minimize or not take advantage of the allowable opportunity to teach kids in person that phase 3 criteria would allow. So again, we put this out there just as a preference so that if schedules emerge that look like this, we then can gauge community input or family input against what we believe would be the best option for maximizing instruction of students. If we do need to offer some type of rotation schedule, and by that I mean where students, not all students obviously are attending school every day in person, but we are rotating which groups of students are attending in person and which groups are receiving instruction virtually or through Chromebooks or other resources in a supplementary fashion. Then we wanted to gain information from families about those perceptions. We do ask, just a retrospective and moving forward, as far as lessons learned, can they help us to understand which aspects of the continuity plan we implemented this past spring worked best for them, or which would be a priority. And then we get into their access as far as technology. Do they have access at home? Is there a device at home that could be utilized by a child or a student to access instructional resources, either online or through a preloaded device? It could be a thumb drive or some other device that we could use to transfer academic materials and resources for students to work on during the times when they cannot physically attend school due to the rotation. And then, of course, we get into transportation. We're interested in how children are getting to school or did get to school for this past school year, and then any changes, obviously, to the transportation element of schooling that families are anticipating. We'll need to know those so that we can plan accordingly. So those are the questions that we've come up with as work groups, because that is the data needed by the work groups to answer some of the key questions that they have in order to then propel their planning forward from the perspective by which they're attacking this equation, so to speak. So that's the survey. Any quick feedback or questions you all have about the survey? I'm going to continue on with the presentation, but wanted to give you an opportunity to provide any input you thought should be considered.
I have some input on the committees. So can we have teachers on the committee and some students on these committees to, especially a couple students?
We'll continue to augment those work groups. Right now, they're augmenting it, looking for those who would be good resources in order to answer the questions that they developed. So we began with a small number of facilitators brainstorming, and now we're going to expand the audience to consider the questions and provide input. So that my vision is that those work groups will continue to expand as needed. But we do want the input of staff, and that's why the staff survey is being developed to go out. We didn't want to do it out, want to put it out at the same time to avoid any confusion for our staff members who have children. We want them to complete the one for their student first, and then a couple days later we'll issue the one for staff so that we keep them distinct. But absolutely, Mr. Collins, will continue to augment the membership of those work groups.
So Dr. Benson, is there a timeline associated with that? Because I know, and I guess you were going to continue with your presentation, but the dates included in our material this evening for getting the, I guess, the timeline, it says it would allow approximately 3 weeks for development of the entire required instructional plan due to DOE prior to 7/24, which I guess was adhering to the 15 days in advance. I mean, that's a month from now. It's not a lot of time when, I guess,
yeah,
at what point are teachers integrated?
Good question. I may be about to enter the, and I'm not sure. I've switched back now on my screen to the PowerPoint. Is it back for you as well, or is it still showing the survey?
It's still on the survey at the moment.
Okay, hang on for 1 second here, because I'm about to get into that very question or that aspect. Okay, I can stop this. Let me get back to
While you're doing that, Dr. Benson, is there a paper version of the survey available?
Not currently. We're putting together as a Google form to, but we could then download. So actually, yes, I'm sorry. Once we get it into the Google format, we can certainly download it as a Word doc.
The Smoot Library is currently open, I believe, so paper copies could be available there, for example, or
We're doing meal pickup or something.
or
Yeah, let's
right,
pick up.
or sorry.
Okay. Chris, I'm trying to share. Let me try again. Get back to the. See if that works. Am I back to the PowerPoint for you all?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry about that delay. Okay.
Am I correct? Am I correct in assuming that that each school has a skeleton staff available at the building?
I'm not sure I understood. In this plan, is that what you're asking?
No, currently.
I'm questioning distribution of paper versions for those for folks who can't get access to a computer, and there certainly are some in the community. Is there someone at the school sites who would be available to distribute?
We can make staff available. I have not, I've maintained the governor's recommendation that wherever possible, we're teleworking.
Certainly. But
for this, and I heard your point about making it available perhaps in the library or other, outlets that would make it available in paper copy, but we will, it's a good point, and that's a good piece of input. But we could certainly make it available at the school offices for families who would need to drive by instead of accessing by their phone or online or that type of thing.
I mean, you could put a box outside.
With the grab and go meals.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another opportunity we could utilize as well. Okay, so Ms. Gonzalez, I hope if I do not address the question you have, please bring it back up for me once I get through the next slide or two. So I do have benchmark dates coming up to kind of explain targets for our development process. But we want to issue the survey tomorrow, allow the survey to run through Saturday. We'd like to have those results then ready for the work groups to review. In other words, we'd like to do it by Google Forms so we could download rather efficiently then the results and make them sortable so we can begin to do our calculations starting the 29th. Then for the next couple of days, we will not only do the calculations, but we'll also undoubtedly have to do some reaching out to families from whom we've not heard, because we really do need to hear from everybody in order to accurately calculate bus routes and that type of thing. The instructional design options, those groups are going to be working, and I believe they'll be working in concert with our technology group to troubleshoot some of the questions they've come up in terms of the back and forth with Chromebooks and the instructional resources, how we're going to have those resources be made available and then refreshed for different groups of students, how the machines can be sanitized, that type of thing. Our health, wellness, and nutrition group, they have talked about and they're receiving information from the state in terms of health screenings that we'll need to conduct each day for students, what those health screenings entail, excuse me, how we will handle situations if a student does appear to be symptomatic, procedures for that, communication with families, and then we're also going to need to look at meal plan service in classrooms. We've been asked to try to not utilize ancillary or large group meeting spaces. We can certainly have students there, but not in great groups. That's the whole point of trying to keep those shared ancillary spaces sanitized and used at a minimum during the school day. I'm also going to be working with the risk management group and Gary and his folks to identify any professional development needs that we have for proper sanitation procedures. And then we are already accounting for cleaning supplies or other protective equipment we believe we would need to begin the school year. Okay. As I mentioned before, we're going to solicit information from our families regarding the transportation needs, as well as their instructional needs. We need those responses back, so I'm utilizing this platform with our community to try to spread the word that this questionnaire is coming out. The information we collect from our families is very important and vital to our planning. We really have to define new assumptions rather than rely on previous in terms of transportation, because of the challenges that we undoubtedly are going to face here to develop a schedule for maximizing instruction. So things that we've already started to contemplate and do the calculations on are things like how many bus drivers will we have available. Part of the human resources guidance is to try to be sensitive to employees and students who may have pre-existing conditions or be more susceptible to more susceptible to severe illness. So we need to account for that. Obviously, we need to be able to calculate how many students can be transported per bus. We have several different types of buses, and so the number will be different depending on the bus. Do we need to switch equipment? Do we need to adjust the route so a piece of equipment can be better utilized on A route versus B route kind of thing? We did get clarification because it was brought up, can children from the same household or siblings ride in the same seat together? And the answer from the Virginia Department of Health on that one was yes. And we are also looking for a waiver or looking for the ability to transport students in a fashion that instead of every other seat will allow students to sit diagonally from each other in every seat, but only one per seat, and to kind of zigzag it from front to back of the bus so that we maintain as large a distance as we can between students, and then possibly require the use of a mask as age appropriate on the school bus as part of that waiver. So we're hopeful there, because that would certainly increase the number of students we could serve each day. So here's some of the key dates and the benchmarks that I think you were alluding to, Ms. Gonzalez. But we needed to first complete our review of the 3R plan, brainstorm those known issues and questions. We completed that on the 16th of June. We've developed that family survey, and where it's possible, we already began answering questions from that work that those groups did once the 3R plan was released. So that's completed in one sense, but it's ongoing certainly in the other. Tonight, I'm obviously updating you all as a school board, and we are hopeful then tomorrow morning we can issue the family survey to begin collecting that data. We are running calculations, and we want to complete those calculations by the 26th of our transportation capacity, as well as our classroom capacity per school. So obviously, there you see the importance of being able to account for all the children who will need bus transportation, so that we can schedule them accordingly, and then develop routes accordingly in order to maximize the number of kids we can bring to school at one time. Certainly, I mentioned that we're going to issue a staff survey and request their input in this process. We're very interested in some of their pursuit professional development needs in light of the activity that we had going this spring to finish out the school year. And from a budgetary standpoint, this is where I'm anticipating we may have some adjustments at the school level, even the central level, to administer or to be responsive to some of the needs that may emerge that could not be planned for back in last February, when we were unaware of the epidemic and the need to offer school in the fashion that we're going to come this fall. From that information and from that process, then again, it's my belief that the most logical, we're going through kind of an inductive process here, that the most logical schedule will emerge for each of our levels, for our elementary, for our middle school students, and our high school students. But again, it's all predicated on that, the collection of enough data to effectively approximate and plan those services. So we put benchmark dates there as far as what we would like to have completed when. All of those dates are for our planning purposes. If we are able to adhere to this timeline, that would still provide us 3 weeks to develop the instructional plan that's due to the DOE under phase 3. For us, I believe it's 15 days before the first day of school. So for us, I believe that was around the 26th, maybe, of July. But we backed it up a couple days, where I'd like to have that completed by the 24th, limited and publicized for our community, the plan that is. Certainly, if we know aspects, or if we know schedule, if we know schedules, or we know other aspects of the plan that we know are going to require families to plan, we'll put that information out as soon as we have it, because we know we want to give our families time to adjust, to consider thoughtfully then the probable schedule and plan that we're going to utilize for their student. So again, they can begin working to develop daycare options, or options for care for children that are accessing remote resources instead of attending school in person on particular days. Okay, so you see before us the challenge that we have. We have a good bit of information still to collect. We have then a number of weeks then that we need to work with that data to develop just the scaffolding of what school will look like come the fall. Once that scaffolding is in place in terms of schedule, then we can utilize the staff input to begin defining more clearly the professional development needs, some of the more finite logistics that will need to be put in place internally to facilitate, bus routes facilitate all the other aspects that are going to be necessary to bring this to open school successfully in the fall. So I appreciate you. I know it's a lot of information I've gone through. I've tried to provide you kind of a glimpse of what's going on behind the scenes right now in terms of our work. Again, these groups will begin to augment, and certainly the information that we'll be considering is going to increase considerably when we get the family and the staff surveys back. So at this point, I'll pause. Questions you may have or guidance or input you want to provide, I'm happy to receive.
So the, Madam Chair, may I speak?
Yes.
So the delivery of the education from teacher A to teacher B to the students, if they're teaching math, is there going to be a standardization of what's going to be delivered, that all students will get the same delivery through the online classes? That's a big concern. And what happens to kids that don't do their work at home online? What happens to the ones that don't show up for school? What's the plan with that? That was a two-part question.
I heard like a two-part question, and I'm not sure I got the first part, Mr. Collins, clearly, but
the delivery of education standardized.
Students who would be, are you thinking that students would be taught at school, either at school or remotely?
So
That's
I was
not the case.
I was speaking about. So sometimes they're going to be remote, and sometimes they're going to be in person. So
that's right.
When they're remote, the educational delivery system standardization, in other words, that whatever the course that is taught for Sealston Elementary is the same as King George Elementary or wherever, that the teachers are saying that are teaching the course are delivering the standardized information.
Yeah. Okay. So the curriculum itself is consistent in that it's all based still on our Virginia Standards of Learning. It's not a revised curriculum from a learning standards perspective. It's certainly going to be a revised delivery model, but the consistency with the curriculum will need to remain, and that's part of what the professional development, what I would anticipate teachers would be clamoring for some professional development as to how they can then translate what they have been using in terms of pedagogy and assignments, assessments, so that it is a split delivery in terms of in-person, and then perhaps activities and assessment opportunities that they can have students engage in at home, but the accountability would still be there because they'd be expected to bring it back and have it assessed by the teacher. So I'm hopeful that addresses the first part of your question, but you had a second part.
Well, you actually answered the second part, but not the first part.
About students not coming to school altogether.
Well, yeah. Yeah, what, are you going to send the truancy officers out after them? Or?
Yes, it would be no different than, in that respect, it would be no different than it's been.
So how about they're not doing their online stuff? What happens then?
Well, it's not just online stuff, but it would be resources then that they would presumably be bringing back to school to have assessed, reviewed, for teachers to provide feedback to the students. So if they have nothing then to bring back and produce, that accountability is still there with the teacher, just as it always has been.
Okay, so back to the first question about the standards. Right now, the delivery is different for different students in different schools. All the teachers aren't doing the same delivery. So I think that probably Ms. Richards' daughter, Elizabeth, mentioned that. And I've seen that it's different. It's not working out that good, let's put it that way.
Yeah, no question. And that's why that question on the survey is there, to try to gauge how much variance we had. in a sense, and I think, you know, I remember an email Ms. Hawk wrote once upon a time too, that there's certainly lessons learned from the spring model that we had to quickly put together in order to continue our educational services. So I think your point's well taken that I think you're trying to make, and again, that would be part of that professional development need is to try to make sure that we have the capacity then to operate in this type of a new or next normal kind of environment that we're going to have.
Chairman, I have like 5 more questions. Let me know when it's my turn.
I have a question.
Can we just go down the line, Ms. Gonzalez? Did you have any
Sure,
questions?
certainly. One question at a time, because I got a bunch
Yes,
too.
please.
Okay. So along the lines, Mr. Collins' question, so in talking about in-person instruction versus virtual or at-home instruction, you know, I'm assuming based that you know, that comes from the requirement to stagger schedules so that you've got fewer kids in the classroom. But we don't have more teachers, so I'm assuming that on, you know, say group A that's at school half a week and group B that's at school half a week, the teacher is still teaching full-time in the classroom, because that's why it's staggered in the first place, so that everyone's got equitable time in the classroom. How are the days, the at-home days for students, are they going to be managed by teachers? Like, are there going to be teacher interactions on those days? Because that would seem to me to be hard when they're also doing in-person teaching on the same days. So is the expectation that the at-home days are going to be more student and parent driven, or has that been discussed?
Yeah, there has been some preliminary discussion about could we have, so to speak, and again, it may not be the classroom teacher for that child, but could there be a system where we could have available, much like we do this summer, kind of a teacher on call, but a little different model than that, but some way then to provide you know, real-time or near-time access to an instructional staff member to help support at-home work that's being completed. I think that's getting to what you're suggesting. We've not, that group, the K-8 instructional design group, I know is engaged in that type of conversation. So it is a possibility to provide support. I don't think, because for the very point you made, Ms. Gonzalez, that because a teacher would be still teaching as they were before all day, albeit, you know, if it's half the students that they had at one time, staggered across days or weeks or whatever it turns out to be, you know, I doubt we would establish a system where they could do both, where they could provide the real-time resources at the same time they're teaching some students live.
So where I forget the exact terminology, you used something about it wasn't standby teacher, but the like auxiliary teacher that could be managing the at-home days while the regular teachers in person. I guess where are those teachers coming from?
Yeah, and that is the question that they're pondering now. Could we be creative in scheduling instruction in the school? And in many cases, we have to kind of shatter that paradigm of this teacher teaches these kids, so to speak, in order to accomplish that type of thing. So I don't have that answer today. I know that we have folks that are brainstorming and being creative in possible ways to include our principals. That may be very well some of the input we get from staff as to how they have ideas that they could share, so to speak, with each other to try to free up somebody to be that person at a time in the day. And it may not be all day that we can provide it for every grade, but we could have creative use of paraprofessionals that we have on staff, that type of thing. There are any number of ways that we might go about it. Again, we're trying to define this next normal. We're looking at ways that we can provide as much support as we can. We all wish that we could simply have it the way we used to, and we're anxious for the day that we can return to that. But in the meantime, we don't want to leave any stone unturned about what's possible. If we ultimately find out that it's simply not possible, then it is what it is at that point. We'll look for another way to provide maybe asynchronous support in some way for students who are working remotely, or stagger the schedule in such a way that the amount of time is minimized, that they're not accessing live support. That's the work that we're going to be looking at here in the next week or two, or 2 or 3 actually, once we get the results back from our families and staff.
Okay, thank you. I'll save my questions for the next round.
Ms. Hawk?
Yes. Can you approach the concern about assessment for loss? Because some students have had wonderful at-home experiences since March, and other students have had none. And those students are not going to be able to approach the next grade without some kind of compensation. And in order to do the compensation, you have to know the loss. So in terms of, what's our thought about that?
Yeah, we've had a good bit of discussion about this as a region of superintendents in different ways that we believe those initial weeks are going to need to look to try to mitigate any summer learning loss, or in this case, a spring summer learning loss
6 months.
that has occurred. So you know very well that each year teachers assess where students are, and at the beginning of the year there's a certain amount of I don't want to say remedial, but at least backing up a little bit to then fill any gaps that are needed, not just the beginning. I don't want to suggest that it's a chronological easy equation. Our teachers are marvelous and they're talented, and they, in real time, throughout the year, they're going to need to make decisions about when it's time to back up and fill a either a knowledge or a skill hole that needs to be filled for a student before they can progress forward. So those types of decisions are made per student throughout each and every year. The summer learning, undoubtedly, then we're going to have to plan from a curriculum standpoint and provide options and resources for teachers to do just what you suggest, Ms. Hawk, and that is assess where students are, not just generally, but where individual students are and what resources they may need to use with that student to try to mitigate as best we can any learning slide that's occurred between last March and August 10th.
Okay, thank you.
They're good questions, and they're ones that if I had a magic answer, I could solve that for all the students in Virginia. The reality is it needs to be a case by case, and they need a teacher's. That's why a teacher's craft is just so magical, that they have to then diagnose and then provide a differentiated experience for a child to mitigate not just a summer learning loss, but any kind of hole, so to speak, in that student's academic experience.
Okay. All right. Ms. Tolliver?
I don't have any questions that haven't already been asked, I don't think.
Okay. Dr. Benson, I just have a question. So are you currently working with Parks and Rec and extending any type of childcare services through the school year if we go to an on and off alternating schedule?
Yes, we just last week, Ms. Fisher is working with Parks and Rec to develop the required, they offer camps in our schools in the summertime, and I know Mary has been working with our Parks and Rec folks to submit the health plan that's required so that they can operate in our schools. And she and I just talked the other day that when school begins and we are looking to have Parks and Rec reinitiate their before and after care programs, we would need to amend that plan slightly to make sure that it covers all the school sites for the before and after care program. So the short answer is yes, absolutely. The long answer is specifically here's how, in developing those health plans with them so that they can operate in our schools.
Okay. Mr. Collins?
Will the employees be required to wear masks?
Dr. Benson, the question was, will the employees be required to wear masks? Can you hear us?
I'm hearing you, but I'm not sure. I heard employees.
Will they be required to wear masks?
It is recommended that employees, that are teachers especially, wear masks. Given the nature of a classroom, there will be times when teachers are unable to observe the 6-foot distancing. So that will be encouraged. I know that. And again, our health work group is working through some of the questions they had in terms of, the screenings about PPE and those types of questions.
Ms. Gonzalez?
So I didn't get the,
You want
so
another
will they
question?
be required to wear masks? It sounded like recommend
The teachers will be,
that they'll make their own decisions. Is that what I hear?
No, it is part of, and I fully anticipate we will have teachers needing to wear masks, and we may, again, I don't want to jump ahead of the work that's being done and put an answer out here to you and publicly that then our work group is receiving guidance that gives some other best practice or have to backtrack on that. But I do know from what I've read that it is recommended from the CDC that at minimum teachers are wear masks, particularly at ages when the social distancing just is not a probable scenario, no matter the number of students in the classroom.
Will the school system pay for those masks?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well, Mr. Collins. Did the school system provide masks?
Yes.
Yes, that's one of unless an employee, I would think that unless an employee has a preference of a mask they would want to wear, in the absence of that, we could certainly have available masks for our employees.
In light of that, can we investigate shields instead of masks? Many school systems are going to a shield, which I understand can be produced by 3D printers. Has there been any research by our work group into the use of shields?
That's the first I've heard that, Ms. Hawk. I can look into that, though.
Thank you.
You went out of turn.
yeah, you went out of turn.
Do what?
You're out of turn.
I was piggybacking.
It was
Ms. Gonzalez?
Yes, Dr. Benson, the substitute teacher situation, so I know there are already challenges finding substitutes in a pre-COVID environment. Do we anticipate having fewer substitutes, fewer people that are interested in being substitutes? And what is our contingency plan for that?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't believe we're anticipating having fewer substitutes from which to pull. I don't know. I don't know how this would affect in terms of applications that we generally receive from folks who are interested in substitute teaching. It could very well be, COVID could be a deterrent from folks applying. But thus far, we've not received, to my knowledge at least, overwhelming requests to be removed from a sub-list or to not be called upon to provide sub-services.
Okay. Thank you.
Did that answer your question? Or I assume that since we don't anticipate a drop, we've obviously not been considered a way to mitigate a perceived drop when we don't anticipate that.
Yes, okay, I guess if you haven't, I guess I would have, I don't know, it was a thought that perhaps there would be fewer people interested in, I know substituting is a challenging job anyway, if there would be fewer people interested in that, giving...
It's a challenge, and it's certainly a good point of interest. It's also it's related to will we need greater capacity, and I think the answer is yes, to the extent we can find it, in particular our bus drivers, and perhaps our subs as well, for those people who may very well be more susceptible to severe illness. That's another of the guidelines that that's been put forth in the 3R plan, is to try to be sensitive to that as best we can. So that could further limit the number of employees, existing or substitute, that we have available to us to utilize in supporting the school.
And so if that's the case, I know in some cases, such as in the elementary schools, if a classroom is short a teacher and there's not a substitute, they'll combine classes. How does that, I mean, that would seem to be not an option given the social distancing.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think half of the matter would simply be students in the classroom. That would defeat the whole purpose for having reduced student loads to begin the year. So we would not be able to combine classes. We need to then utilize existing staff or substitutes to try to help cover any kind of staffing hole we have temporarily.
Okay. And would substitutes, assuming you still have the same level of interest in substitutes, are they going to be properly prepared to be teaching in this new environment? Would there be some, I don't know, and I don't know how you address that.
Yes, that would be a PD question that we would need to then augment our existing sub-training or orientation opportunity to include aspects of the new environment come fall, no doubt. No, good point.
Okay, thank you.
2 questions.
Ms. Tolliver? No. Okay, so, Dr. Benson, when and how are you going to contact the additional people that you feel will be on the working group, and who's making the decisions as to who those people would be?
The work group facilitators, those initial 2 then, are responsible for contacting, in this early stage, contacting then both internal and even external group members. You know, there could be a group that's working on a situation where they need to consult with Java Lakes and a neighboring division, but it's more goal-oriented than simply trying to build as many and as big a groups as we can. It's really, you have a task, and that is, we have limited time. We need these questions answered, we need to challenge these assumptions, and we need to put this together, not in a hurried fashion, but in a reasoned, logical system. And so to the extent they need to bring people in to be part of that work group to accomplish that short-term goal, that's how it's proceeding.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Collins?
So in King George, the speak is all about, quite often, being able to connect to the internet and having enough data. So are the buses are we going to be able to put a hotspot? What is Mr. Hopper or that committee working on to realize everybody's connected?
Are the buses going to be involved in that?
Well, are they going to send out a bus and park it in Shiloh, and you can get, a certain amount of bandwidth for their learning?
No, I think you're talking about hotspots or
yes.
That type of established. We've explored it. We haven't ruled it out, I don't want to say, but it's a point in that the equity piece comes in. We certainly don't want to engineer a system in terms of supplementary instructional resources that favor students who have a device and broadband with unlimited access at home, and leave behind those students who have no broadband or who have broadband but simply don't have a device that they can utilize all the time. So, a hotspot, while it might provide broadband, it makes an assumption that a student could get to that hotspot safely and for the period of time that they would need to be there, and B, that they have a device that would be usable with that hotspot. So while not ruled out, that's not our first go-to, so to speak. Instead, we've looked at how can we then efficiently refresh Chromebooks so that the broadband is not required, that the resources are refreshed and loaded in the machine for the student to utilize, and it's not reliant on a connectivity issue of some sort, which would then put us right back in terms of an equitable situation for students. So it's a good thought. It's certainly not, we looked at our schools themselves as hotspots and what capability we have there. But we feel more confident about being able to consistently provide ancillary resources through the Chromebooks in a way that we know those resources are there and are available offline anytime a student needs them.
Thank you.
Ms. Gonzalez?
Okay. I think it's only realistic that we should expect some number of our teachers and students to get sick, likely with COVID-19 as we reopen the schools. So if a student or a teacher tests positive for COVID-19, will there be a period of quarantine initiated for the class? And if so, that whether, regardless of the answer to that particular portion of the question, will the absentee policy in general be adjusted with an expectation that more children may be absent as we go forward?
The second, let me answer the second one, because that statewide came up early with our state public instruction superintendent, and his instruction to us is that he does anticipate waiving accreditation next year should we open in phase 3 for the very reason you stated, that from an attendance standpoint, if we adopt a schedule that requires some students to attend while others do not, obviously that's in terms of attendance data. So as far as excused absences and that type of thing, that's kind of a moot point, because the state would waive those requirements that are traditionally in place. Going back to the other part of that, though, forgive me, Ms. Gonzalez, just give me a quick reminder.
If a teacher or a student tests positive, would there be a period of quarantine?
The protocol, or establishing a protocol, and I know that our wellness group is working with state guidance, and then that's one of the very questions that I read through today was, what would be the protocol for not only students who exhibit COVID symptoms, but any positive cases, and also then how would we separate students who may exhibit symptoms that are not COVID related, but are, just normal fall illnesses that with kids seem to abound once the weather starts to turn a little cooler. So they are good questions. There's a lot of what if work that we're currently doing to establish those types of protocols in conjunction with our local health department that we speak with and communicate with regularly, even now. So that's yes, we will have a protocol. What it will be, I don't know yet.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hawk?
Yes. If we go to some type of alternative days, then the parents are probably going to be the ones who do the homework support and the makeup information support. How can we offer support resources to parents, whether it's a teacher available for hotline questions or online resources or paper resources for parents? Because having tried to teach 5th grade math to my grandson with my master's degree in social work, just didn't quite make it. So I do think we're going to need extra resources for parents.
Well, we will, and you mentioned the one, just as we have this summer, we tried to set up that kind of teacher on call to help support families in that respect. But you're right, we are going to need to rely and engage, not just rely on families to help with that, but engage them. And so I know we're going to be talking about, and one of the questions in the survey asks about, in a matter of the way the question's worded, which aspects of what was provided were more effective and what were your top 3 kind of thing, so that we could try to leverage those types of activities a little bit more. At the same time, then, that we try to be creative in offering support for families, for parents, to help engage their child. The actual delivery of the assignments, of the resources, then could also provide tips for parents or tips for families, support for families. There's no saying that there would need to be limited to just schoolwork for kids. We perhaps could record videos or other resources that parents can utilize to help with their children and to make them more of an engaged partner in that learning process.
That would be a great idea.
Yeah. All these questions are good questions, you all, and I'm sure there are many other questions that are surfacing out there. I want everybody to know that we are working in good faith. Many of our staff and then the new members that are coming on board these groups are working hard to try to anticipate a lot of these questions that you're coming up with, try to meet those needs before we get out the door. It is a brand new day. It is our next normal that we will need to meet those challenges for the short term. And even though our planning will be very thorough and we work hard, there's no doubt in my mind that we will have fourth quarter adjustments as we approach opening day. We will even have adjustments and need to have adjustments as we open our doors, particularly with the establishment of transportation, a new transportation system and that type of thing. So, I say that because we are all, the adage that we're all in this together. We need to then work together to make this new normal work as best we can until we can get back to what we all want, and that is for all of our children to access the learning each and every day that they deserve, and we certainly hope we can get to.
So, is it my turn yet?
Yeah, so we're going to take one question from online. Can we just go ahead and do that? Yeah, I see that. So I just saw there was a real long one that posed an interesting question about homeschooling. I know that we've talked about that.
Have any of them already been answered?
We'll be able to capture these questions because I don't have that. I mean, once this meeting is over, how do we capture those questions?
I can see it.
Okay. Can you send it to us? Thank you.
Those would be good to say because we can utilize that as an FAQ, or in addition to our FAQ, or formulate our own FAQ for the opening of school. So thank you, Chris, for capturing those.
I can't read it. Can we just go ahead and read that one question? Because I think that kind of
You want me to read it?
going into what you were saying.
This conference is no longer being recorded.
Do you want me to read it?
Yes, if you can read it.
Okay. It says, I would also be interested in a school-sponsored homeschool option, sort of like summer school, where we were provided materials to work with in the home environment. For those parents who are able to teach from home but lack guidance on best materials to access for their students, such materials could help to keep those students learning the same material as their in-school peers, as well as removing those students from the classroom to relieve pressures on classroom and busing restrictions. It's not really a question, but I guess. And then I guess the one at the bottom kind of goes with it. What about a free homeschool program sponsored by the county?
Yeah.
So I guess we're going to be
supported
right.
Through the county, and I'm certainly intrigued by that. In fact, Dr. Boyd and I talked about at the high school level, we've utilized Virtual Virginia in cases where we have a student who needs a course that we don't have enough students to warrant the hiring of a whole teacher, but we can provide the access through Virtual Virginia for those students to take that course. And then this could be an opportunity if we had a virtual option that students, and I'm not just talking about the high school, but in this example, and since I talked to Dr. Boyd, this person's question, resonates with me. We've thought about it. Could there be a possibility to offer an online curriculum for students, particularly for students, and we understand there are families out there that might be hesitant to send students back at all, and certainly respect that, but could there be a way that we could maintain them as students, but also support them through a 100% virtual approach? We don't know yet, but we're certainly exploring that as an option. I see no reason why we couldn't at least explore it, and to the extent we're allowed, then offer that type of partnership for our students, whether they be current homeschool students who would be technically public school students, but accessing some of the very same resources in the same mode that they've been doing, I think those are certainly viable options, at least for the time period during the flexibility the state is offering. I don't know, of course, after this once this situation ceases to be, if the state then comes back with the attendance requirements, we have to think through that too. We certainly wouldn't want to get students engaged in a curriculum coursework and then have to cease it because the state allowances have gone away as the epidemic has ceased.
Okay, Dr. Benson, there's one question on here that is very intriguing, and that is, when families send in their completed surveys, will they be committed to their scheduled choice of instruction? So when
Can you repeat the first part of that? I couldn't hear you.
So when families send in their completed surveys, will they be committed to their scheduled choice of instruction?
It's a survey, not a survey.
Right, so we just want to make sure that they understand that.
A collection of data. I'm glad that question was asked. It's not at all a commitment to one or the other. It's just saying, given that we understand it's likely we will need to stagger or do something different, what's your preference? It's simply just gauging a general preference. And my hope is that preference that emerges coincides with what we ultimately determine is the best schedule to meet our goal. The very first statement I gave in this update. And I want to repeat that because we've had instances in the past where we've tried to gauge public opinion. It has become more of a feel of kind of a referendum. What does everybody want? Whereas in this process, we have a relatively short period of time to determine logically which option or what schedule is going to maximize our students' in-person learning time. That's the bottom line. Whatever the schedule will be will reveal itself if we pursue that goal alongside with the perception data we gain from our families and from our staff. So I don't want people feeling as though they need to fill out multiple questionnaires to try to sway the outcome. I don't want people feeling as though they're making a commitment to something that they've committed to through the survey. So good question, and I hope that assures that family member that we just are interested in your perception. We will ultimately then determine the best schedule for maximizing instruction with our kids.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Collins?
So I have a money question. So our ADM is based upon our students. So how's that going to work with staggered schedules and the online teaching, since they take a picture of a certain time?
Yeah, that's a good question in terms of our funding. And one that Dr. Lane has said the state, the good news is that all school divisions are going to be in the situation. So however the state compensates for those days when, from an attendance perspective, their methodology for determining ADM no longer works, they're going to have to apply consistently across the state, Mr. Collins. So I believe the state is going to in some way need to compensate for that. I've not heard specifically how Dr. Lane is choosing to approach that outside of the intention to waive the accreditation aspect associated with attendance for next year, should we open in phase 3, which it looks very likely we will.
Ms. Gonzalez?
Okay, so I had a very similar question. I was going to ask a homeschool question, but that was kind of already addressed. But so to follow on to what Mr. Collins asked about our ADM being affected by the staggered schedules, how about for, say if we have a certain percentage of students whose families choose to homeschool for a year, not because they want to remove their child from the public school system, but because they don't want to send their children to school during the pandemic, will that, count against us next year when our ADM, is lowered because parents made a choice regarding the health of their family for a year or so?
You're right. You're absolutely right, and it is a concern statewide. If we have reduced enrollment, which would be different than a reduced ADM if calculated the same way. But if we had students who withdrew then conceivably, yes, we could then run into a ADM funding shortfall. All the more reason then to hold in abeyance, fund balance that we designated until we see how our ADM, not just the sales tax, but how our ADM is trending as well next year. So a wise forethought.
So that sounds like it's not necessarily being discussed. It would just be, we would have to account for that in our management of funding this year, I guess. Like there's not a statewide stance on waiving that or something and using numbers from the previous year?
Yes, I mean, my approach initially would be to handle that problem on our own and not count on it being discussed at the state level. There have been, and I don't think it's beyond consideration that there could be discussion at a state level. There are examples, for instance, in Southwest Virginia for several years now with hold harmless for drastic decreases in ADM due to the ability of the flight from that area due to the lack of employment or businesses moving, changes in businesses in that area. So the concept in terms of trying to support schools and hold harmless budgets that are established at a time of year where they anticipate X number of students, and by the time they're accounted for, it has decreased by 10-15%. There have been funds in the last several budgets to offset those types of scenarios for those school divisions that experience that kind of swing in ADM. But I don't know, and I wouldn't count on the state, bailing us out, so to speak, for that type of enrollment loss due to COVID.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there's another online question. Dr. Benson, it says, how will you do virtual learning for families with multiple kids and in different grades?
How would we provide virtual learning for families that have different kids in different grades?
Yes, sir.
So the options or the primary option we looked at is to utilize the Chromebooks, and those Chromebooks would then be issued per student. So even though it would be issued per household and students share a Chromebook, if that's what this person is thinking, we would issue one per student so they would each be able to access the Chromebook on their own. We wouldn't assume that a family device would suffice and to be shared. And I guess I may be reading too much into the person's question, but
no, I think
they're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's.
They're talking about one kid's in school and one kid's not.
No, I think that would just be a scheduling issue they would have. But I think the biggest concern is that they have 3 children or 4 children and 1 computer in the house. How are they all going to be sharing the virtual learning and having different directions to go? It's a challenge. But having the Chromebooks is definitely important. Yes, that's good to hear. Ms. Hawk?
None at this time. I'd like to continue to answer the questions online.
Okay. All right. Can we take one more question online?
So there's a lot of social aspects involved with school, prom, all these other events. So I'm really concerned. I mean, a lot of kids are only being able to play with or be social with 1 or 2 kids when they normally are social with a whole community. So how are we addressing the social needs of these young people?
I'm trying to think of your context. In other words, we're discouraged from bringing, mixing students and bringing groups of students together for obvious reasons. Are you asking?
Well, so school is more than academic. School has a lot of purposes, and part of it is to grow socially and as a community. So I'm not. I understand what the requirements are, 50, but are we going to address that? Or are we just all going to address academics?
Well, no, I think that we can continue. I mean, the good news about phase 3 is that it does allow for, unlike this past spring when we were all not allowed into closed school buildings, it does open school buildings for that type of interaction between kids, even though we are going to try and maintain that social distancing. It's certainly a step ahead of where we were in the spring where there was no interaction. But that said, your point is well taken, and we are looking at some of the social, emotional needs that our students have and how we can best plan in the short term. And for that matter, prior to all this, we looked at and we want to pursue social emotional learning as a larger component of our curriculum. At any rate, even prior to the epidemic, Mr. Collins. So I believe that some of the resources we've initiated and that we will expand for, as if the adjustment schedule wasn't there, will still be applicable to try to address some of the social emotional needs of our students. We can't obviously recreate the scenario or the context you're basing your question, because you're right, until we get back to what we knew to be normal, the interaction between students, some of the hidden curriculum aspects of schooling may be lessened simply because the frequency of their attendance will be lessened. But again, my hope is that this next normal is short-lived, that we can get back to where all of our students can attend school every day. But in the interim, we will do all we can to address not just their instructional needs, and I apologize if I've laid heavy in terms of answering questions from an instructional perspective, but the social perspective as well, and the needs, the services we need to provide from a social perspective to our students, those will still be there and still available to our students.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Gonzalez.
So I have maybe a related question. So along the lines of, being concerned about students, social, emotional well-being while in school, I've been, it's something I've wondered about in general prior to all of this was whether or not the availability of recess and outdoor activity to our students is adequate, especially for the much younger children in the early years in elementary school who, obviously learn a lot through playing and unstructured activities. So as we're concerned about the mental health of our students and the social aspect, there's a lot of evidence. I just read an article, I think, on NPR yesterday that was interviewing the director of an infectious disease research and policy program, I think at a university, I forget specifically where, talking about the transmission of the virus and how outdoor spaces are really some of the safest spaces you can be in because you've got wind and that sort of thing. So if we're, I know that weather and wet playgrounds and things have a tendency to keep students inside anyway, and I'm concerned that with the new social distancing requirements, recess is going to become even more of a rarity. So have there been any discussions of using outdoor classroom opportunities when appropriate, or ways that children could be more inclined to behave in their natural ways and interact a little more normally with their peers that would then improve their mental health at this point in time anyway, as well as getting that social emotional element in their day?
And get virtual recess.
Not at this stage, Ms. Gonzalez, but I'm confident that teachers are going to want to utilize any advantage they have to then, if they're outdoor spaces they want to use for instruction and can use effectively. I don't know of any reason why we would limit that outside of making sure that it's scheduled so, we're not mixing groups of kids, or we're not traveling with groups of kids across the school to get to an outdoor space that could conceivably then, violate one of the other guidelines. But I don't disagree with you at all. To the extent we can utilize the school facilities that have afforded to us to include outside grounds, great. I give the principals great latitude to be creative, to address the needs in their school as their school needs to address needs. Every classroom, every student, every school is different in how they go about that. But I would not foresee any limitation on utilizing an outside space outside of just being pragmatic and careful to plan travel, if necessary, of groups of students in a way that doesn't inadvertently mix an inappropriate number of students at one time and thusly, increase any exposure risk.
Okay, Chris, that question has kind of already been answered. It's about shields, and I think that Dr. Benson said he's going to look into allowing shields. Do you have another question? So that's a pretty good question. Would there be live classes or pre-recorded if we do distance learning? So I guess the biggest question is will any of these classes be able to be recorded?
Right. And not necessarily pre-recorded, lectures or that type of thing. That could be. So I don't want to, misrepresent that we would have recorded class sessions that students would sit and watch, just as that would be the very same thing as is going in the classroom that day for other children. I don't want to create that perception. Now, I would think that there might be instruction repeated 2 days to the same group, to two different groups of students, and then flip or stagger the classroom, the work type stuff accordingly to match after 2 days, the two student groups are with each other. The obvious question there is that from a pacing standpoint, it may take twice as long. And that would be yes, if you were to simply deliver in the traditional sense. But that's, again, where our school level or our teacher level professional development may come in terms of adjusting our curriculum writing so that we can then provide exposure, provide students opportunities to meet learning standards, albeit in a different fashion with the new paradigm that we have to work within.
Okay. Do we have any more questions from the board?
One last one.
Okay.
So in general, my biggest concern is the involvement of the teachers with the work groups. When all is said and done and our schools reopen in August, they will, as usual, bear the brunt of all of the challenges before us, and the ones that are left to implement all of the policies that have been decided upon. I'm encouraged that they are going to be involved with the work groups, but I hope that is sooner rather than later, since there's about 32 days until the 24th of July. But nevertheless, looking ahead, one thing a question I did receive, will there be childcare offered for staff members who have children that are above grade 3, but are too young to stay at home to learn? So
Childcare in general is involved, or
yes. So if a teacher, if you have a teacher who has a 7-year-old student, then that student is rotating and only in school, say, 2 days a week or whatever the schedule ends up looking like. But the teacher is required to work 5 days a week because they're still required. Is there going to be childcare offered for teachers in those positions or staff members in those positions?
We've not planned on that at this point. The child care that we certainly hope is there is the before and after child care, but we've not looked. We've started with giving ourselves the greatest latitude in terms of spaces we need. We need the classroom, so I'm not sure from a space standpoint where I would offer child care in addition to school during school hours.
So what are teachers? What are those teachers supposed to do with their children?
Yeah, and it's the child care in general, not just teachers, but I think other two-income families that work and have children. It certainly sets a dilemma in terms of child care, one that is not new to us. We had it this past spring, although it's fair to say that I think employers at that time were reacting in much the same way in terms of greater allowance for teleworking and that type of thing. But I have brought that up at the state level with Dr. Lane that I would hope statewide our state leadership is advocating on behalf of all families who will have a need, an increased need for child care, for employers in general, not just school employers, but employers in general, to be sensitive to the fact that schools are having to operate in such a fashion that is forcing not all students to be in school every day, and that employers need to be sensitive to that and help their employees in terms of teleworking policy or liberal leave or that type of thing.
Right.
I'm not in a position, I don't have authority to offer that, but I certainly realize right away that is going to be a major factor for our families, for all families, to have to deal with, given what schools, not just King George, but all schools are going to have to do in this phase 3 of reopening.
Right. So I understand that the challenge does apply to, can you hear me? That the challenge does apply to all, most families with 2 working parents. But I think teachers are in a different situation. I mean, I'm a parent in a 2-parent working household with 2 small children, and I recognize that it is challenging. But I have the luxury of being able to telework. I could telework prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, and I foresee that continuing. And teachers aren't going to have that luxury because they can't telework while they're trying to teach their students in person. So I think that luxury obviously can't be afforded to them, and I think they should be considered in a different realm than other.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to considering it. I'm just to answer your question off the top of my head, I'm thinking that even though we have half the number of students coming to the school, as an assumption, the same number of classrooms in our schools are being utilized to provide instruction. And so we've been encouraged to close down the large group spaces. I guess I just don't know from a facility standpoint to start with, and then from a personnel standpoint, we already talked about a stressor in staffing and trying to provide kind of that teacher on call or some type of resource from home to further stress, staffing resources to offer a daycare during the day. I just don't know if it's feasible from a facility and staffing standpoint for us to offer that and offer, our primary mission or service in terms of instruction. I'm not opposed to considering it, and if it's something that somebody can show me, hey, this can be done, if it's allowable, I don't have any qualms against it. It's certainly going to help us to more consistently have teachers available to teach. I understand that. I just wouldn't want to commit to an answer tonight that would, falsely lead folks on, or I don't see the capacity in my initial thinking about it off the top of my head. That's all it is, just a capacity question.
Right, I understand. I'm not actually familiar with the Parks and Rec morning and afternoon, like the before and after school care thing, and I'm just spitballing, but I didn't know if there's any way that, that's obviously maybe more of a county thing, but maybe something that could be looked at that, I know funding is required, but that's some kind of option could be put together through Parks and Rec, maybe, I don't know.
Okay, no, that's good input, and that could certainly be a lead that maybe we could pull that thread in terms of the staffing part. We just have to look then at how many, school-age children would we be talking about on any given day, and would we have space then to accommodate them safely?
Could that be included as a data point in the staff survey? Maybe it already is.
Yeah, that's a good. I'll write that one down.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Ms. Pansier?
Yes.
I've had a number of questions from folks who want to know how to register their child for kindergarten. Could somebody Dr. Benson, could you make a statement about that now, just for those listening?
Sure. They are certainly welcome to email Mary Fisher. I believe we are now in phase 2. We may be able to offer the kindergarten registration and screenings as we have traditionally, but just a real quick answer for you. They can email Mary Fisher, and I think it's mfisher, Fisher, at kgcs.k12.va.us. And she is our supervisor of student and family services.
Okay. Are we good?
Registration.
Everybody? All right, well, Dr. Benson, thank you very much. Appreciate your input,
No, you're very welcome.
your hard work.
I appreciate you letting me vet, kind of our work process. I appreciate you allowing the questions, the external questions to be read and heard. I know that, everybody's anxious. Please know that. And we're not looking to decide things in a vacuum. We understand that we are under time constraints, and we're under other guidelines that are less appealing than we would like. But we are going to work in good faith, and we are going to do what we can to maximize our kids' in-person learning time and do our very best to provide the instruction we can in the early part of this year. And we all hope and pray that we can get this behind us and we can return to our formal normal. I appreciate you all as a board and your support, and I know that you're answering questions, you're trying to answer questions and fielding the very concerns you're seeing tonight from your constituents. So we're one community. We will bond together and we will march forward and do what we can do for our children and pull together for each other until we can get to that next normal beyond this one.
Great, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, is that considered your superintendent's report? That's the next item on the agenda.
Speaking for.
I think you got me one fourth, right?
Yeah, I think so. Okay. All right, we'll move on to.
I'll forego the superintendent's report because that is what we're working with.
Correct. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go on to.
Can I add one thing though?
Sure.
Thank you also to and to make sure our public knows that our meals program is continuing and will continue through July on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Keep an eye out when we have holidays like 4th of July. We'll have an amended schedule, I'm sure, there, but we will continue to offer the meals program for families through the summer months, and my gratitude goes out to our workers who are continuing to put together those meals and to deliver and distribute those meals. Appreciate them greatly, as I'm sure that our community members do too.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to board comment. Ms. Tolliver?
I don't have anything further.
Ms. Hawk?
No comment, no.
Mr. Collins?
Just a brief comment.
Okay.
We asked a lot of questions and there's a lot of things on people's mind of how this is all going to work. But let me assure you that King George County Schools will always be the best school system in the state of Virginia, and we will continue to function to that standard. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gonzalez?
I have no additional comments.
Can I do have a comment.
Sure.
I'd like to thank
Time's
Dr.
up.
Benson and his staff, because I know not only is this unprecedented times, but the amount of work they have to do in a short period of time and the millions of variables that come into play in all of what's going on right now. So I really appreciate all of their hard work, and I know they'll get it done. Thank you.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd like to add is I know that it's been frustrating for everybody. It's the big, unknown question out there. I know that we've gotten some people like, what's going on, and it takes time. We're down to the crunch here, and I have a lot of faith in that Dr. Benson and his staff is going to come through and coming up with a good plan. I just appreciate not putting a plan out there that has a lot of holes in it and doesn't have any answers for us. Still leaves us kind of hanging on the edge of our seats. I think we're moving in a direction, even though we don't have an affirmative plan, and I really appreciate that. So, okay, so do we want to go into closed session?
Pursuant to State Code Section 2.2-3711.A.1, for the purpose of discussion, consideration of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, resignations, and retirements of employees of the school board, I move that we enter closed session.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're now in closed session. It's double-sided. I meant to make one for you that wasn't. I forgot, sorry.
They make the motion, Gene?
Yep,
Ms. Pence,
I'll do it.
get everybody back. Yeah.
Where is it?
Can I go ahead? You should read it in color and everything. Look,
Should we go?
I move that the King George County School Board return to open session and certify that pursuant to State Code 2.2-3712D, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under this chapter, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened, heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting by the public body.
Second and certify.
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 Certify. Do we have a motion?
Make
to
a
adjourn?
motion to accept
Oh, we have to accept
personnel
the
as
motion. I always
presented.
forget,
TC just did.
I second.
yeah.
Did TC make the motion?
Yes. he
TC
did.
made the motion, Carrie
accept personnel.
seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Move to
Chair
adjourn.
votes aye.
Second.
Motion carries. Any
Motion to adjourn. Right?
motion to adjourn?
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Did somebody second it? Gracious.
Thank you all for being here the whole time.